Chapter 1541. Guarding the void front line was a very tough job, especially now that the gap between the two sides was so huge. They did not have enough combat power on the surface, and it was difficult to make up for the lack of combat power in the future. They had to wait for a future high-level origin to grow. Using the ready-made low-level heavenly gods as an example, they would have to wait for about an era. The lower the level of the primordial realm, the longer it would take. In the end, it could be delayed to about 3 or 4 eras. They could afford to wait, but would the underworld just sit there obediently? Obviously not. The countless lives that would follow could only wait slowly. However, the void front line could not afford to wait. Instead of waiting for the people behind them to grow bit by bit, it was better to seek the power they had now. The void territory in front of them was very far away from the middle and upper realms where the war was going on. It was so far away that they did not interact with each other. Yun Nuashing even felt that if this void territory was not discovered by them, the people here would not even know what the Death Abyss fog was until the destruction came. They would not know what was going to happen here. However, until the day their territory was destroyed, this void territory hidden in the void would still be exposed. What was going to happen would never be less. Yun Nuashing did not know why they were both upper realms, but he was still exploring this void territory to find out the reason. He digressed. What he, Jing Yuanji, and Min wanted to say was that there were so many ready-made high-level life forms here. If they were to bring them all back, it would be quite difficult to tie them all up. They were all high-level life forms, so who would be afraid of who? They could only think of another way. However, they had to solve the reason why this void territory was isolated for no reason. If they did not expose the danger in front of them, these people would not act as they wished. The war on the other side of the void engulfed the entire void. Gu Zhongming and the others listened to the three people's conversation and soon understood what they were thinking. Gu Zhongming said, "Ning Fei and I have already agreed to follow you. We can go anywhere. But if we want to summon others, it's still very difficult." Ning Fei nodded. "However, if the inexplicable isolation of this void is removed and the real dangers are exposed, maybe there will be corresponding countermeasures. We can only use them at that time." The group soon arrived before the gates after exchanging a few words. The grand party of 11 people was very attention-grabbing. It was rare for superior beings to come in such a grand party, and most of them were solitary. Even if there would only be 3 or 4 people in a party, and that was excluding those who were part of a group of void giants in the first place. There seems to be something special hidden in the vast power of the natural order. It doesn't seem like it was deliberately created by someone. It seems like it was formed by unintentionally seizing the power of the natural order here. Yun Nuashing's gaze swept across the huge city wall as her eyes flickered faintly. Yuqi shuddered and leaned closer to ask softly, "Is it related to the 4th rank?" Yun Nuashing nodded, her gaze gradually becoming strange as she looked at the city in front of her. "I just hope they didn't directly use those chaotic rules to create it. If they really did not filter and directly use the power of the natural order and the power of the natural order here. Haha, that would be fun." His words were intermittent, and his voice was very low. Jing Yuanji and the others couldn't hear him clearly. They looked at each other and shrugged. Anyway, from his expression, it shouldn't be a particularly good thing. Maybe it was particularly fun for him. When they were about to enter the city, Yun Nuashing, who was walking in front, suddenly stopped in his tracks and frowned slightly. There was suddenly someone in front of them blocking their path, and their eyes met directly with his. It was obvious that the person was coming for him, and he could not help but frown. Why is it so troublesome to enter the city recently? If they are not looking for trouble, then they are blocking the way. Who are you? Why are you sneaking into the city with your people? It was a teenager who looked like he was only in his teens. He was wearing armor that did not fit him well. He was still adjusting it when he spoke to them, as if he had just put it on. He was looking up at Yun Nuoshing and the others. His gaze swept across the huge black cloak on Yun Nuoshing's back, and there was a hint of suspicion in his eyes. Yun Nuoshing looked at him. Although he looked like a teenager, he was just like the young chief, who looked very young. In fact, he was a high-level origin powerhouse. Yun Nuoshing did not know why he had suddenly blocked their path. What? Do we have to look at one's identity to enter this place? Yun Nuoshing said casually. She moved her black robe discreetly and wrapped Frost even more impeccable. If that's the case, who are you? Are you qualified to step into this city? You're saying that I'm not qualified. The teenager raised his eyebrows, and a murderous aura emanated from his body. His figure suddenly flashed and appeared in front of Yun Nuoshing. His slender palm contained a powerful force as it slammed toward Yun Nuoshing. Boom! A powerful energy explosion suddenly exploded in front of the city gate. Those who had noticed the commotion but did not pay much attention to it immediately stopped in their tracks and looked over. When the energy dissipated, they saw that the slender palm was stopped a foot in front of Yun Nuoshing's face. Then, it could not move an inch further. Behind the fair palm was Yun Nuoshing's evil dark red eyes. His body contained enough energy to press the void into nothingness. Get lost! Yun Nuoshing fiercely glared, and a violent energy emitted a weak might. It casually exploded, and the young man was sent flying dozens of meters away. This caused the young man's expression to change slightly. He did not expect that this attack would not achieve either of his goals. Just as he was about to charge forward again, a fierce shout suddenly came from the city gate, causing the young man's body to stiffen. Jing Hung! Come back! The teenager smacked his lips in annoyance. He stood still with his arms crossed and muttered to himself. After a while, a young man suddenly appeared beside him and grabbed the back of his collar. The person who had just arrived was dressed in blue and wore a blue hat. His face was delicate and he gave off a serious vibe. At first glance, he looked gentle, but there was a trace of fierceness in his eyes. After the young man appeared, he grabbed the teenager's collar and slammed him on the head. Then, he pressed the teenager's head and apologized to Yun Nuoshing and the others. I'm sorry. Jingheng only knows how to cultivate and has never been disciplined. He doesn't know the rules. I'm Jing Ju. If you have any requests, feel free to tell us. I hope that you can forgive him this once. Forgive what? Isn't it just? Oh. Senior brother, why did you hit me again? Oh. Yun Nuoshing narrowed his eyes and stared at the two brothers. Jing Ju's words were sincere, and he didn't think of anything else. However, Jing Heng seemed to have many strange thoughts in his mind, which made him a little unhappy. However, he didn't bother to argue with them. He just walked past them with his people and said, "Keep an eye on your people. Next time." Oh, there won't be a next time. He was in a good mood today, so he didn't bother to pay attention to this kind of thing. Thank you for your mercy. Jing Ju nodded and cupped his hands toward Yun Nuoshing and the others. He flicked his sleeves and dragged the teenager back. The latter was still shouting and yelling, "Ow! Senior brother, you can't do whatever you want just because you are powerful. Aren't you just 10 million years older than me? Ow! Senior brother, there is definitely something wrong with those two people. They are either the Black Ghost on the punishment list or the Fallen Immortal on the judgment list. Otherwise, they are the little lost in the divine court. Woof. Shut up. You've embarrassed yourself enough. You've found the wrong 20 people. You've made our starry sky apologize to them. This time, we'll take you back and suppress you. You won't be released until 200 million years later." The people in front of the gate were speechless. When he mentioned the two people in front, it was still okay, but when he said the last sentence, Yun Nuoshing and the others couldn't help but shrink their necks. This was really what that young man said. But it didn't matter, the most important thing now was to stay calm, and not let the people on the street see any signs. The people from the Myriad Tao Immortal sect are also here. The little guy just now seems to be the most eye-catching little guy in the Myriad Tao Immortal sect recently. He seems to be the only one named Jingheng. The one who called himself Jingju just now is probably the senior brother of the Myriad Tao Immortal sect. They don't seem to be very far from the peak of the Source Realm. I just don't know if the sect leader of the Myriad Tao Immortal sect will show up this time. TSK, the ruins are such a big event that even the leaders of some of the Void Giants would come in person. Every time, they would bring a group of people. This time will definitely be no exception. Let's wait and see. Now that such a big event has happened in this space, they might all show up later. But I'm more curious about that group of people. Have you seen them before? No, I've never heard of a force being controlled by a group of girls. But is it really okay to bring such weak people here? Plus, there's that guy who doesn't show up and has an abnormal aura. If we provoke him, I'm afraid we'll be in a lot of trouble. Could it really be the three people that Jingheng said? Shu, don't talk, don't listen. Let's go into the city. After listening to a series of words, Gu Zhongming knew that Yun Nuoxing and the others didn't know anything, so he explained to them, the Myriad Tao Immortal sect is the same as the Divine Court and the Soul Crossing Academy. It's an overlord of this void territory. However, it's different from the other two overlords. It's said that the Myriad Tao Immortal sect has something that can rival it other than the Star Spirit Spring. Their influence is slightly greater than the other overlords. In recent years, the people who came from there are also quite powerful. Ning Fei thought of something and said, when we were fighting for the Star Spirit Spring, we had a fight with someone from the Myriad Tao Immortal sect. But it only took 2 moves. Ah, right, one of the 2 overlords that you let go is from the Myriad Tao Immortal sect. The other one is from the Palace of Punishment. The list of punishment that Jingheng mentioned just now is something that they made. Those with names on the list either have a grudge against them or are werewolves who have caused trouble in their area. I haven't seen them yet, but judging from the conversation here, they shouldn't be absent. Yun Nuoxing thought for a while and said, I don't really care about that. I just want to know if they will block the way. Yu Qi pondered for a while and said slowly, judging from what we are going to do now, they shouldn't block the way. Everyone has to work together to help. Otherwise, no one will benefit in the end. After he finished speaking, he was stunned for a moment. He glanced at Yun Nuoxing and said, but you may be an exception. The overlords of the void were basically equal in strength. There might be a slight difference in strength between the upper, middle and lower levels, but there was not much difference between the peak levels. The overlords were all at the peak level of origin. Those guys from the Palace of Punishment and the Myriad Tao Immortal sect can probably touch the realm of Yuanshi. I just don't know if it will be so smooth. That realm has rejected countless people. It has been 51 eras now, but no one has entered the realm of Yuanshi. I'm afraid it will be difficult. Not only those 2 families, but also all the peak level of origin of the other families can't squeeze into that realm. I heard that there is something in the deepest part of the ruins that can help people of that realm find the path of Yuanshi. I don't know if it's true or not. Sai, don't think too much. Let's not talk about whether that mysterious thing exists or not. Anyway, even if it does exist in the deepest part of this space, no one will know. How can that person enter that place before everyone else? If so, why hasn't a Yuanshi god appeared yet? That's just a rumor. That's true. As soon as they entered the city, information would enter their ears. They had to listen even if they didn't want to. In the process, Yun Nuoxing and the others obtained a lot of precious information. For example, the trivial matters of this void region. It seems that the isolation of this void region is really strong. Yun Nuoxing whispered to the person beside her in her soul. Even the imprint of the 2 of them entering the realm of Yuanshi did not spread here. It's not normal. Min's reply was short and direct. What realm of Yuanshi? Gu Zhongming picked his ears and suddenly widened his eyes. It can't be what I think it is, right? It's what you think. There are 2 guys in our void region who entered the realm of Yuanshi. 2 in the long 11 eras. Yun Nuoxing let out a long sigh. Dao Tian stretched out his slender finger and poked Yun Nuoxing's cheek a few times. One was killed by him, and the other was his close friend. Gu Zhongming and the others. Their brains were overloaded with information. Gu Zhongming and the others' souls were in a state of serious injury. They could not think. Their minds were filled with realm of Yuanshi, killed, and no. Even when they were dragged to the center of the city, they still could not recover. What really made them come back to their senses were the gazes that were cast at them from all directions. Those gazes were filled with suspicion, wild thoughts, and inexplicable meanings. News of what happened at the city gate just now has spread here. Yuqi pricked up his ears and listened for a while. After a while, he sighed helplessly. I'll leave for a while to meet those old friends. You guys go ahead. Don't wait for me. If there's anything, contact me through your soul. As he spoke, he shook his head and sighed as he walked towards the other side of the city. His face was full of reluctance, but he had no choice but to go. It seemed like he had received a grand invitation. According to him, it was probably someone who had used a mysterious method to stay in this space like him. I didn't see any familiar faces. Ning Fei shook his head, his gaze darting back and forth between the palaces and pavilions in the city. There were many people with terrifying strength standing on the tall buildings. They were very powerful. If it was before, he felt that he would be very interested in seeing these people, and at the same time secretly compete with them. He would compete with them by a whole realm earlier, and then cry with Halcyon. Perhaps it was a little exaggerated, but that was what he meant. Although there wasn't such a grand occasion the last time I was here, there were similar events. At that time, there were also many powerful people appearing. It's just that. Gu Zhongming glanced at the people beside him as he spoke. He didn't know what expression to make. I suddenly feel like there's nothing to see here. Yes. Suddenly, a figure descended from the sky and landed on the street in front of Yun Nuoxing. The ground that was built by the power of the natural order and the power of the natural order cracked. Colorful energy gushed out from the cracks like a fountain. In an instant, the street was brightly illuminated. Everyone on the street was shocked. Countless people in the palaces and pavilions on both sides of the street turned to look. Yun Nuoxing took a deep breath. She wanted to say something directly. Suddenly, she held back. She said in her soul, "My body is not in the late stage yet, right?" Jing Yuanji smiled awkwardly. She awkwardly patted Lord Feng, who was staggering. Since they came to this void, they seemed to be blocked by people. In a short period of time, they were blocked 3 times. And each time, it was the kind that came knocking on their door. They had been very low-key ever since they came to this area. How could they always get into trouble? Could it be that the will of the Great Yuan realm forced the origin life to collide with it? That inexplicably strengthened the power of the natural order, and then caused a group of people to take turns to appear on the scene? Are you people from the celestial sect of Nier? Or are you people from the mysterious Heart Sea? The person who came was holding a golden-red halberd with a curved blade that looked like a giant sickle. It was more than 2 meters long, and it was slanted towards the ground. It was a tall young man. He was wearing golden armor and a golden robe. He looked like a god of war. His eyes were filled with divine light, and countless people who saw it felt very painful. Phew. Yun Nuoxing took a deep breath. Then, she calmly exhaled. She took another deep breath. Min glanced at him and took a step forward. 9 layers and 7 transformations. Blocking the way? Who do you think you are? The young man's body was emitting a brilliant golden light. It was as if he came by stepping on the natural order and rules. He glanced at Min and stomped the halberd in his hand on the ground. Inju, who are you? It's none of your business, Min replied coldly. Everyone. At this moment the people on the street were really stunned. As soon as they heard the name Inju, they all knew who he was. Some exclamations and discussions came from every corner. This person comes from a very powerful void area. In his early years, he often caused trouble in other people's worlds. He was once on the criminal and punishment list and the fallen immortal list of the celestial sect of Nier. He is a ruthless person. However, after that, the three parties had a big fight. No one knows what the result was. They only know that the two overlords removed him from the list. The result is probably… Well, Gu Zhongming said in a low voice, perfectly performing his role as a tour guide. Ning Fei also thought of something and added, by the way, I heard that he was fighting all over the world because he was looking for some special items, which seemed to be the carriers of some rather special rules and orders. Some rather powerful forces had such items, and he had snatched them all by himself with his halberd. Now that he's here, maybe. It doesn't matter. I don't need to know who you are. The young man named Inju stabbed the halberd on the ground and took out a bag from something in his arms. Then, he threw it in the space in front of Yun Nuoxing and the others. He pointed at Yun Nuoxing and said, I'll give you the thing. Leave it. Crack. Jing Yuanji clearly saw a blue vein on Yun Nuoxing's forehead. Her face was bright and glorious before the end of the world. Jing Yuanji couldn't help but cover her face and hold her forehead. She muttered in her heart, Master Feng's physique has been strengthened a lot after mixing with the origin life. Except for the first time because those people didn't know how to open their eyes, the other two people who blocked their way were coming for Frost. Jing Yuanji and Min looked at each other. Both of them sighed silently and began to gather energy. It was almost time to start the rescue. Well, to save this city. Chapter 1542. From the very beginning, Yun Nuoxing knew that Frost's existence was a problem. She was an imperfect life form that lacked self-constructed laws. He could not hold her in his hand, put her in a box, and he could not just leave her to the side. She was far more fragile than what Jing Yuanji and the others had imagined. Yun Nuoxing only carefully supported her as they walked forward. He knew about the problems and hidden problems, but he did not pay too much attention to them. Although he hated trouble, there were some things that just had to be done to cause trouble. He was not afraid of anything because of this. Robbing someone on the street. To think that Inju was a peak reciprocity being, yet he could do something so shameless. Ugh, but it was true that many times the more powerful a life form was, the less they cared, and the less they cared. This Inju was probably the same kind of person. In the hearts of people like them, there was probably nothing else they cared about apart from cultivation and breakthroughs. Naturally, they would not be ashamed to do something so embarrassing. Inju was shameless, but Yun Nuoxing was not. He sucked in a deep breath with a sunken face and slapped away the bag that was floating in front of him. He pointed to the side and said, If you want a joke, please go around us and turn left. If I'm not familiar with you, please don't strike up a conversation. Yep, at least he was patient. He felt that his temper had improved a lot. He just did not know what Inju was thinking. He really could not be bothered to get involved in any trouble. I never joke. Inju pulled out his halberd and slapped the bag towards Yun Nuoxing. He charged towards Yun Nuoxing with both hands. Shocking light of energy flowed through his eyes, and he charged towards Yun Nuoxing in an instant. The weapon in his hand produced a deafening sound. Strange phenomena filled with endless energy appeared in the space, falling towards Yun Nuoxing with the power to tear apart laws and melt order. If you don't come, I'll take it myself. A dark red light flashed through Yun Nuoxing's black eyes. He held the dark red destructive energy in his hands, but he hesitated at the last moment. He hesitated for a moment, and then he casually condensed the energy of order, turning it into a sword and swinging it down. Boom! The pure white longsword erupted with an energy radiance that casually tore apart the countless images of Candle. He held the longsword in one hand and in an instant, he slashed out hundreds of thousands of times. The afterimages and the real body merged into one, and the dazzling energy sword radiance gushed out in less than a breath of time. A 10,000-mile-tall silver-white wave suddenly gushed out from the front, causing Zhu, who was about to perform another move, to stop abruptly. He swung his halberd like a windmill, leaving countless afterimages around him. Each afterimage was stronger than the previous one. It was as if there were countless halberds swinging around him like the wind, tearing apart Yun Nuoxing's sword energy inch by inch, then throwing the remaining energy to other places. The moment the battle began, Jing Yuanji pulled Siyu and the other girls away from the battle. Min, Gu Zhongming, and the others retreated to the side lightly. The former looked at Zhu, who was bravely charging forward, and watched as he disintegrated Yun Nuoxing's casual attack bit by bit. She couldn't help but say, "Lord Feng went easy on him." He let go of the Sea of Void. Min nodded. There was a trace of confusion in his cold voice. "Why? Is there a potential threat? It shouldn't be. I don't know what Lord Feng is thinking either. I can only say that he should have his own considerations." Jing Yuanji tilted her head in confusion. According to Lord Feng's personality, he should have directly slapped Zhu and the large city in front of him into the void. They had just prepared to save the city, but in the end, Lord Feng went easy on him. Bang! It didn't take long for the pure white wave to be torn into pieces by Zhu. With a roar, he pounced towards Yun Nuoxing with his halberd in hand like a human-shaped beast. The gleaming weapon was pointed straight at Yun Nuoxing's chest. Even though he disintegrated the enormous energy, his attack wasn't affected in the slightest. As the halberd flashed, the space and the void seemed to be locked down. A violent collision that shook the void suddenly sounded on this street. Countless pavilions and palaces within 1,000 feet on both sides were pierced through by the might of the halberd. The ground 10 feet behind Yun Nuoxing to 10,000 feet away was torn open, and the power of rules leaked out like a reverse waterfall. A large group of figures suddenly flickered and appeared in the sky. They all had their hands behind their backs as they looked down at the battle below. They were all people who had been watching the show from the destroyed buildings on both sides. Now that the scene was destroyed, they floated out. Many people noticed Zhu's attack just now and couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. The series of attacks just now were swift and violent, especially the last one. When the energy light below disappeared, everyone hurriedly turned their gazes and saw the 2-meter-long halberd in front of Yun Nuoxing's chest. It seemed to be less than a millimeter away from the latter's chest, but it was this distance that could be easily crossed that Zhu couldn't cross no matter how hard he tried. A strange look flashed across Zhu's eyes. From the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of Yun Nuoxing's deep, dark red eyes. He suddenly turned around, grabbed the halberd, and spun in a circle. Then, the long spear stabbed at the target in front of him like a storm. The spear rain contained countless flickering black energy, and many energy anomalies appeared in the void. Then, they bombarded the area he was focusing his fire on. The violent energy vibrations caused the people on the other side of the city to feel it. Buzz! The smoke and the light of energy were suddenly torn apart by a powerful energy. The string of torrential rain, that was stabbed tens of thousands of times in a second, was suddenly torn apart by a pure white light. The halberd instantly turned into a long stick and stabbed out. The broken pieces scattered all over the sky. Before Zhu could stop his continuous stabbing, he saw a black figure dashing out from the space where the afterimages and energy blended together. His eyes that were flashing with dark red light were filled with impatience and irritation. He had one hand behind him, and the other hand was holding a pure white longsword condensed by the power of order. His body was like a ghost as he approached Zhu. At this moment the entire vision slowed down by a lot. The pure white greatsword that carried an unimaginable amount of energy gently floated down, an explosion that shook the void. A long river of pure white energy suddenly burst out from the street like a surging wave, sweeping away all the visions and other energy lights that surrounded the place. The sudden burst of energy caused the expressions of countless people to change drastically. Just the aftermath of that energy made many people tremble in fear and unable to move. That wave carried the power to destroy the void and rush to the other side of the big city. In a short moment, the streets suddenly lit up with countless energy lights. The power of divine runes and divine rites were emitted from the streets and some corners of the city, as if they wanted to stop that energy tide. Then, a series of exclamations suddenly sounded in the city. Countless people watched as the energy tide rushed to the edge of the big city without any obstruction, broke through the city walls, and rushed out, bringing with it an immeasurable amount of the power of order. Even the city itself dimmed a lot. "Ah, crap, I forgot about it," Jing Yuanji exclaimed and covered her face with her lily-white hands. She was so engrossed in watching the show that she actually forgot to stop Lord Feng's attack. They were still accumulating energy at this moment. "Yeah, I forgot." Min nodded as well. Siyu looked left and right and saw the faint smile on the two women's faces. Although Min had always been cold, Siyu also discovered after observing her for a while that although this woman with facial paralysis looked extremely cold, she also had feelings. However, she usually didn't show them. Just like now, she only had a smile that was no more than 1 millimeter. She looked at the two of them and could not help but roll her eyes. "I just feel like you two did it on purpose." No. I really did forget on purpose." Jing Yuanji smiled sweetly. She smiled very calmly. Min nodded emotionlessly to the side. "Yeah, I did it on purpose. Everyone. She really did do it on purpose. However, if she really said it out loud, it would be very infuriating. Suddenly being picked on and treated like a monkey on the street was indeed very annoying." The light on the street dispersed. Yun Nuoxing maintained her posture of sheathing her sword, but Yin Zhu was nowhere to be seen. Quite a few people were stunned. That attack earlier was powerful, but it should not have been enough to reduce a peak reciprocity expert to dust. Not far away, on the ground that had already turned into ashes, a figure suddenly crawled up from the ground, patting the torn robes on his body as if nothing had happened. The right hand that was holding the halberd now only had a stick left, and it had also turned into ashes. It was Yin Zhu himself. He looked a little disheveled, but in fact, he did not suffer any injuries. His aura was just a little chaotic. He glanced at Yun Nuoxing and calmly said, "My skills are not as good as yours. We will fight another day. Farewell." With that, Yin Zhu turned around and left. The power of laws and order spread out from his feet, forming a path in the sky. He vanished into the depths of outer space in a single moment, as if he did not even care about why he had come to the city. Yun Nuoxing glanced at the person who had left and sucked in a deep breath. "What's wrong with him?" Jing Yuanji brought her people over from the side. She glanced at the experts floating in the sky before turning to Gu Zhongming. "Let's find a quieter place. I don't want people to watch us like monkeys." Gu Zhongming nodded and looked in a certain direction. "It's said that the people who come here will all gather there in the end. Let's go over first. Mr. Feng has already displayed such strength, so no one should cause any trouble, at least for now." Yun Nuoxing raised his eyes and looked at the city next to him. It was a pavilion. He had never seen it before, but its general structure was not far from the pavilions he knew. The pavilion was a little tall. It was the kind of height that was visually tall. It was as if a pavilion had been pulled up in front of him. Its structure was still stable, but it had been stretched out like a rubber band. There were many images of various life forms carved on the walls of the pavilion. A humanoid life form that was 7 feet tall, a humanoid life form with a scorpion tail, and all kinds of strange monsters. They seemed to be exotic beasts or exotic beasts with a humanoid body. There were also some images of pure human life forms carved on it, but their faces were blurred. He could only roughly make out their figures and clothes. I just heard that there's a saying about this pavilion. Maybe it has actually appeared in this void area a few times, but we only saw it with our naked eyes. Some people said that the pavilion is bare and ugly, and they don't know why it was deliberately built to be slanted. Gu Zhongming led his people and walked forward as he spoke. Bare? Slanted? Yun Nuoxing suddenly stopped and looked at the pavilion with a strange expression. That's how it looks in your eyes? He turned his eyes to Jing Yuanji and Min. The latter said faintly, "Off topic, there's no coding. Lord Feng, what did you see?" Yun Nuoxing narrowed his eyes and switched several types of energy. In the end, he even used part of his origin energy to stare at the pavilion that was pulled up. "Oh, it's nothing. I thought it was something big. It's just some special way of drawing in the rules. The center of this city is that building. It's purely built with the power of the rules. This city is automatically absorbing the power of the rules in this space. It's probably pulling in someone's brand." Yun Nuoxing waved his hand casually and said, "The last thing that the war ruins lack is the brand of the rules of life. So, that building is actually engraved with the blurry images of countless lives. If it's seriously damaged, its original appearance will definitely not come out." Min glanced at him. "Why is your vision different from ours?" "I'm the observer." Yun Nuoxing shrugged and replied matter-of-factly. "The observer's vision and perception are difficult to be blocked. Moreover, I also have the origin energy. My vision is basically different from everyone in some special situations. I can see the essence more directly. I rely on this pair of eyes to make a living." In the sky above the destroyed street, Yu Qi stood with a few other youths with a gloomy face. They were looking at Yun Nuoxing and the others who were leaving. One of the youths beside him suddenly said, "What's wrong? Is that the group that scared you?" Yu Qi glared at him and replied coldly, "It's none of your business." After that, he turned to look at the others and said, "I advise you to keep your eyes open. Don't come over if there's nothing. Some people and some things are not for you to touch." "TSK, TSK, TSK. Yu Qi, oh Yu Qi. You're really regressing." A slightly frivolous youth chuckled. "It's been so long and you're already speaking for your new master? Have you forgotten about your past? You..." "Shut up." Yu Qi glared at him. The energy in his body was surging, as if it would burst out at any time. "Do you believe that I won't kill you?" "Oh, that's so scary." The frivolous youth was so happy that his shoulders trembled. He did not take Yu Qi's threat to heart at all. "We've been fighting all these years and you've never been able to kill me. On the contrary, last time, I heard that you were beaten half to death by another guy?" Yu Qi looked at him coldly. He snorted and ignored him. He turned and walked towards Yun Nuoxing and the others. "That's all I have to say. It's up to you if you don't want to listen. If there's a conflict, I won't care about you guys." The few of them were the ones who stayed in the ruins the last time. They were old rivals, old foes. They had been going back and forth for hundreds of thousands of years, so they could be considered as old friends. There was still a little bit of sympathy between them, but they were still rivals, so it was impossible for them to care too much about each other. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter." The frivolous youth put his hands in his pockets as he watched Yu Qi slowly walk away. He then pulled his hands out and shrugged at the others. "Well, one of our friends has run away. You guys run really fast too." When he turned around and started to talk, the others had also left without saying a word. A strange look flashed in the frivolous youth's eyes. He shook his head and laughed secretly. He did not care about anything. His gaze swept across the bare and straight pavilion. He then glanced at Yun Nuoxing and the others who were about to walk in. He left without looking back. At this time, there were already many people sitting in the pavilion. The arrival of Yun Nuoxing and his group attracted the attention of many people. In the battle just now, 80% of the eyes in the big city were focused on that side. At this moment, naturally, there was no one who did not know who this group of people was. Immediately, they all cast interested gazes. Some of the gazes were obscure, some were direct, some were like knives that swept across them inch by inch, and some were gazes that harbored ill intentions. These people thought that they had hidden it well, but they did not know that Yun Nuoxing had already remembered the source of all these gazes. Many of the living beings in the pavilion were wary of each other. They sat at a distance from each other, as if they were on guard against each other. Those who were gathered together were huddled in the corners of the tall building. There were also those who were carelessly squeezing to the edge and looking down. Many of them were looking down, but it was unknown what they were thinking. This place was quite spacious. Many strange beasts did not have any scruples. They just sat down in the middle of a building with their huge bodies. There seemed to be the power of rules and the power of space surging in this pavilion. The space here was much larger than what she had seen with her own eyes. The people gathered here were all powerful beings in this region of the void. They were the most outstanding ones, and their actions were more or less unscrupulous. When they talked, they didn't try to avoid anything. The people on the third floor would often attract the attention of some people on the fourth floor. Sometimes their faces would turn green, and sometimes some people would show anger. It was probably because they talked about something unpleasant in front of them. It's happening again. This time I must. Jing Heng. If you run around again, you can forget about leaving the immortal sect for the rest of your life. A small voice mixed with an exasperated roar exploded from the corner. Some people turned their gazes. Yun Nuoxing and the others also looked over. Then, they saw that the youth named Jingheng was knocked to the ground by his senior brother and fainted. Yun Nuoxing could not help but roll her eyes. He's human, but he doesn't look like one. But with this form, he should be human. He looks okay. I wonder how he tastes. He caused a big ruckus in the city. He looks very powerful. I wonder where he came from. Could he be someone from one of the ancient void regions? The voices in the pavilion were really unrestrained. Since they had just caused a big ruckus in the city, and now they came to this pavilion that seemed to be the center of the city, the topic of conversation was pointed at Yun Nuoxing and the others. However, they did not pay too much attention to it. They went straight to a quieter place and sat down. Phew. I'm back. You guys caused quite a ruckus. Not long after he sat down, Yu Qi, with a gloomy face, pulled a chair to the side and sat down. Yun Nuoxing and the others looked at his angry appearance and were a little curious. What, you were called by an old friend and left on bad terms in the end? Yu Qi showed a mixed expression of a bitter smile and annoyance. He nodded unhappily. Something happened, never mind, let's not talk about them. Although I went to meet a few annoying people, it's not like I didn't gain anything. Yun Nuoxing and the others immediately sat up straight. They rubbed their faces and ears and took a sip of tea. Then, they looked at Yu Qi in unison, ready to listen. It's not that serious. Yu Qi smiled bitterly. After a while, he collected his expression and said seriously, One is the gathering of the big cities this time. I heard that this city created by the power of laws was created by the cooperation of the Soul Fairy Academy and a few other families. They were discussing something here. It seems that they found a way to reach the depths of the ruins, to a space that was not open this time. The other is... Yu Qi paused and looked at Yun Nuoxing. They found the guy who intercepted them halfway. That guy is being chased by a few overlords in the void. He's the guy I told you about last time who broke into the ruins halfway. He's a very dangerous person. Seeing that everyone was still looking at him, Yu Qi scratched his head and spread his hands. That's it. It's about those old friends of mine. Although they make me sick, the information is reliable. Yun Nuoxing took a sip of tea and thought for a while. Then, she took another sip of tea and thought for a while more. Then, she looked at Jing Yuanji. Jing Yuanji blinked and pondered for a moment. Then, she smiled and nodded. Yes. Everyone. Were these two guys talking about encrypted content in front of them? Chapter 1543. In the corner of the pavilion, Yun Nuoxing and Jing Yuanji were exchanging flirtatious glances. Yun Nuoxing winked and pouted at her, and the latter would show a pondering expression. After a while, she would gently nod or shake her head. Then, she would throw a flirtatious glance at Yun Nuoxing. This time, it was his turn to think. After a while, he held his chin and shook his head, sighing softly. Everyone watching the whole process. These two guys were stirring up trouble. They didn't even use their soul power. Now, they were even winking at each other. They were probably talking about the secret of the Deyuan realm's creation. How could two peak origin experts talk like this when they were together? Even if it was to keep it a secret, there must be other ways. Speaking of which, what were they talking about? Their hearts were itching. Yun Nuoxing shrugged. Yes. Jing Yuanji thought and nodded. Yes. Minzwa looked around. After a while, he said with a cold face, Would it kill you to talk properly? Talk privately? Yun Nuoxing smiled and scratched his head. Jing Yuanji blushed slightly and shook her head. Lord Feng is discussing with me about this pavilion. There are many hostile gazes in the dark, and many of them are looking at Shuang. Jing Hing stirred things up a bit. So many people are guessing her identity. There are too few targets to choose from. Lord Feng is worried that there will be trouble later, so he is discussing with me how to get rid of everyone in this pavilion. Everyone leaned back slightly and nodded. Then Yuqi asked, So, what's the result? Jing Yuanji pinched the blue crystal pendant hanging from her earlobe and said, Lord Feng plans to clear the place in one go. No one will be left. Everyone was shocked by this and turned their heads. They just happened to see Yun Nuoxing shrugging his shoulders and spreading his hands. They were dumbfounded and pointed at him. Yun Nuoxing looked and nodded. Yes, yes, yes. Yuan Kong immediately went berserk. He slammed the table and stood up in his soul. He roared at Yun Nuoxing and the others, Can't you talk properly? I don't want to randomly guess and write my own lyrics. Everyone scratched their heads awkwardly and inadvertently glanced at the giggling Yun Nuoxing. This was all because of his influence. She learned from him and applied it flexibly. Moreover, they could even communicate like this. It was really quite amazing. That's right, they had just completed a communication. The general idea was that they had extended from destroying the pavilion to destroying the entire city. Yun Nuoxing pursed his lips and finally returned to normal. The lack of Frost's structural rules is a very serious problem. First, she can't guarantee her integrity. Second, she can't hide her presence like this. The loophole is really a hole, leaking a considerable amount of energy and the power of the rules to the outside at every moment. If not for her high level and unique existence, with the speed of the flow of the rules leaking, let alone the peak of origin, even the peak of origin would not be able to hold on for long before losing their affinity with the rules. Then, it would be difficult for them to mobilize the power of the rules, and their path would have come to an end. Because of the existence of the loophole, I dare not simply touch her with the power of the rules. I can only carefully wrap her in a circle like this. In the eyes of others, I may be carrying something in the shape of a person, such as a creation with powerful power of the rules, a puppet or a carrier of the rules. However, I can't rule out the possibility that some people can recognize the presence of life entangled in the rules on her. However, most of them may think that she is a complicated and powerful life form that is entangled with the rules, leaking a slightly chaotic presence due to the problems on the level of the rules and concept. After Yun Nuoxing and the others finished their conversation, a person suddenly walked to their table. The tall figure cast a shadow on the table, causing Yun Nuoxing and the others to stop talking and turn their heads. They saw a young man in a slightly damaged blue light armor walk to their table. He glanced at Yun Nuoxing and the others and said casually, "Have you seen the group from the Dongxing clan?" "Which group?" Yun Nuoxing replied casually. He still remembered this guy, who was somewhat related to those annoying people. His name was Dragon Bones. Dragon Bones said, "They have a conflict with you." Yun Nuoxing glanced at him and said, "They are dead. I did it. If you have any opinions, just say it. Whether I listen or not is another matter." Dragon Bones heard him and looked at him quietly. After standing there for a moment, he nodded and turned around to leave. "Aren't you here to avenge them?" Yun Nuoxing looked at him casually, a silver light flashing in his eyes. Dragon Bones stopped in his tracks. He did not turn around and only tilted his head and replied, "I am not that familiar with them. We have only met a few times before and I am grateful for leading the way. Those few times of help are enough to repay the debt. Other than that, there is no need for me to protect them. That's all. I won't do anything, but the others will. The people from the Dongxing clan have been watching you. They know that I have met them, so they came to look for me. I came to look for you all just to ask for an answer." Dragon Bones walked back to where he came from. There was no aura or fighting spirit on his body. It seemed that he was really just here to ask. However, from what he said, boom! Suddenly, a golden flash exploded on the top floor of the pavilion. It was like a rolling thunder falling from above. A figure appeared in front of Yun Nuoxing and the others. A huge hand dyed with terrible golden divine runes reached forward. The power of divinity and divine right surged. The vast aura suddenly made the pavilion dead silent. Those who were close to Yun Nuoxing and the others hurriedly flicked their sleeves and condensed an energy barrier or hurriedly retreated. The golden divine runes contained the power of a sure kill. Yun Nuoxing had already felt a hostile gaze when Dragon Bones came over. He had been on guard for a long time. Now that he saw that the person directly attacked, his eyes turned cold in an instant. Dark red destructive energy surged out. "Go away!" Jing Yuanji suddenly shouted. The bright power of the precepts of space condensed into a transparent seal. There were many divine runes engraved on it. The chaotic power of space appeared like a whirlpool, disturbing the space and the void. Yun Nuoxing's cheeks twitched when he saw this. Why did this thing look so much like a brick? Could it be that she was affected by him again? The seal of this colossal brick rushed toward the golden figure with a heart-palpitating power. The energy that burst out in an instant stunned the golden figure. Without any hesitation, he attacked with a lot more strength. The aura of his whole body rose to the extreme, and he pressed forward with his claw. The two energies that were exerted to the extreme exploded together with the collision of the giant claw and the huge brick. There was a roar of the precepts collapsing, and the golden figure flew backward with broken energy. His entire arm exploded along the way, turning into a thick cloud of blood mist with broken bones surrounding him. He hit his head on the pillar of the pavilion and fainted. Jing Yuanji stood tall, and her slender figure was surging with energy that made many people in the pavilion tremble. Many people's eyes flickered as they exchanged glances. Previously, they had only noticed the battle on Yun Nua planet on the street and listed her as a dangerous target. They did not expect that even the person who followed her was so terrifying. Jing Yuanji casually flicked her sleeves and looked at the fainted guy embedded in the pillar. She looked up at the people of the Dongxing clan and said coldly, "This is just a warning. Next time." "Oh, there won't be a next time." Everyone present stared at this group of people sternly. Many people whispered to each other, as if they were secretly exchanging information and guessing the identities of this group of people. This group of people. They had not seen through them yet, but from the strength that Yun Nuoxing and Jing Yuanji did not seem to be their full strength, they should not be nameless people. However, they had never seen a group of people with such characteristics in this region of space. Nameless scoundrels. How impressive. But today we really can't allow you to behave so atrociously in this ancient city. Countless lives in this region of space have gathered here. Do you want to cause trouble here? The sinister voice contained a sliver of a cold smile. A short young man walked down from upstairs with his hands behind his back. He had a faint smile on his slightly chubby face. His vague presence revealed to everyone that he was a peak reciprocity expert, and yep, this presence did not belong to a human. You're still wet behind the ears. Piss off, brat. Min Gang Gang had been watching quietly the entire time. Now, he suddenly stood up and a violent presence ripped the chair he sat on from the ground. His presence that belonged to the pinnacle of origin energy surged out with the presence of space and nothingness, sweeping through the entire pavilion like a storm. Many people became stunned by this. There were actually 2 peak reciprocity experts. The young man's face changed slightly. An emerald presence flowed around him, blocking the corrosion of the power of space. He looked at Min in confusion. His words had been directed at Yun Nuoshing, so for some reason, he had ignited the barrel of explosives on the side. However, it did not matter. They were all on the same side anyway, so it did not matter who blew it up. As for peak reciprocity experts, it was not like they did not have one. Do you really think you're the only ones with people like that? When the space began to tremble because of Min's presence, 2 figures suddenly appeared behind the young man like ghosts. The 2 of them took a step forward, and their vast presence surged without backing down at all. However, it took the 2 of them together to resist Min's presence. This caused their expressions to change slightly, and their eyes were filled with solemnity. They were both peak reciprocity experts, but there was still a little gap between them. Yun Nuoshing was still sitting on the chair, the back of her hand supporting her cheek, and the other hand playing with the cup in her hand in boredom. She stretched lazily. Jing Yuanji and Min could take care of them. No, in fact, Jing Yuanji could take care of them alone. The power and laws of the realm of the gods. The title of the number 1 major world was not for nothing. They had been fighting in the void all year round, and had even fought the most terrifying enemies of the entire void on the front lines for 100 million years, and would continue to fight in the future. How could these ordinary peak reciprocity experts compare to them? Everyone, please stop for a moment. At the moment when the tense atmosphere was about to collapse, a voice suddenly came from the entrance of the pavilion, causing several people who were confronting each other to look away. However, they did not intend to withdraw their presence. At the door, a group of people pushed open the door and entered. The group of people with extraordinary presence attracted the attention of the entire pavilion as soon as they appeared. Many people's expressions changed slightly as they recognized the people who had entered the pavilion. The people in charge of the Soul Crossing Academy, the Celestial Court, the Celestial Sect of Lin Xian, and a few others have finally arrived. Phew, looks like there's no need to fight. I haven't rested much after running around for a day. Walking at the front, a young man with short black hair and a cloak draped over one shoulder looked at Jing Yuanji and the others in the square. There was a faint smile in his black eyes. We've all come for that layer of space. Why do we have to fight here? Why don't we all take a step back for my sake? Everyone, don't be in a hurry to fight. When the time is right, there will naturally be a chance. It's just a misunderstanding. There's no need to be too calculative. Everyone who comes here should focus on enlightenment and enlightenment. Everything else should be compromised. Another person crossed his arms and said with a smile. Seeing that the people in charge of the ancient city had come out to stop fighting, the young man could only wave his hand and ask his people to withdraw their presence. He glared at Yun Nuoshing and the others, then flicked his sleeves and turned to leave. I'll spare your lives. Bang! Yun Nuoshing suddenly stood up. The sound of the chair rubbing against the ground was unusually ear-piercing at this moment of silence. Countless people were stunned, including the people from the Soul Crossing Academy. They all looked at Yun Nuoshing with some confusion in their eyes. They did not know why he did not move at all just now and only reacted now. Yun Nuoshing turned to look at the young man. In front of everyone, he slowly stretched out his left hand. With his palm facing up, he put his thumb and middle finger together and gently rubbed. A crisp, snapping sound suddenly rang out, and some kind of energy fluctuation seemed to spread out from his fingers, causing countless people to be stunned. Their hearts inexplicably skipped a beat, and when they came back to their senses, the sound just now seemed like an illusion. Because nothing had happened, everyone looked around in a daze. There was no energy explosion as expected, and there was no movement. Some people sitting in the corner could not help but laugh out loud. At this moment, the young man and the other two who had turned to leave suddenly paused. In the next second, the three of them fell to the ground together. Dots of energy light gathered on the surface of their bodies, and then turned into a mass of dense light. A vast energy light rain suddenly appeared in the pavilion, and the sky was filled with energy light spots. The light circles circled and danced in the air, then dissipated, and countless light rains sprinkled down. The passing of origin energy is truly wonderful. Yun Nuoshing stretched out his hand and grabbed a mass of light. He placed it in his palm and watched it disappear bit by bit. But within the brilliant light, there are countless dark colors mixed in. It's not interesting and it's useless. Everyone in the pavilion had already become stunned when they saw the dazzling rain of light. Now that they heard what he said, they became rather confused. They had no idea what had happened in that moment, where a peak reciprocity expert and two supreme reciprocity experts had vanished just like that. The young man with the cloak on one shoulder was stunned. A smear of anger appeared on his face as he stared at Yun Nuoshing. He was extremely displeased that Yun Nuoshing had treated his words like farts in front of everyone. Yun Nuoshing suddenly turned his head and stared at him with his pure white eyes. The people beside him casually swept a glance around, and a smile that did not carry any temperature hung on his face. What do you think, right? Sometimes there are some things that you only need to know. It's not good to say it out loud. Yun Nuoshing took a sip of tea and poured the empty teacup onto the ground. A scarlet waterfall of blood appeared. The faint smile on his face was extremely evil. What do you all think? Everyone trembled violently when they heard that voice. They looked at each other. They did not know what had happened. The three people from the Dongxing sect had disappeared just like that. Yun Nuoshing and the others had not given face to the Soul Fairy Academy. Hearing this, they knew that something was about to happen. The atmosphere was so tense that it could explode at any moment. However, no one crossed the line. The young man with the cloak on one shoulder from the Soul Fairy Academy frowned. He did not know what Yun Nuoshing was talking about at all. However, he could feel that Yun Nuoshing was pointing at them. He immediately felt very confused. They had met in person. That matter should have nothing to do with him, right? Yun Nuoshing threw the cup in his hand vertically on the ground. His eyes widened slightly, and an inexplicable smile hung on the corner of his mouth. He waved his hand and sat down. Jing Yuanji and Min looked at each other and sat down as well. They were also a little confused. They did not know why he suddenly acted strangely just now. The young man from the Soul Fairy Academy looked at the people standing one step behind him. He frowned and thought for a while. Then, he casually shook his head and did not ask further. He waved his hand and restored the damaged parts of the pavilion to their original state. Then, he lifted his foot and walked forward. It seems that everyone is quite energetic. His tone became much fainter. He had lost the enthusiasm he had when he first entered the door. Everyone could sense this. Everyone thought about something but did not say anything. Since even the manager of the ancient city did not say anything, and now that Yun Nuoshing and the others had sat down, there was naturally no need for them to do anything. If there was even the slightest mistake, the young man with the cloak on one shoulder would instantly go berserk. The people from the Soul Fairy Academy and the other Void Overlords went to the top floor of the pavilion and began to announce about the space this time. The meaning was just as Yun Nuoshing and the others had guessed. They wanted to gather forces to break through that layer of space. It was said that this time they would be able to go further and deeper. The place they were at now was just an intermission. The situation this time is very special. A large area of space is in an abnormal state. This space is the deepest part of the ruins that has been opened. The space passage we found is the only way to continue going deeper. If we want to go through it, it is completely impossible to do it alone. We have to gather a considerable amount of forces to go through it together. We will. Jing Yuanji lowered her head. Her neck hurt. She did not know if they deliberately made her seat so high, as if they wanted others to look up at her. It made her feel a little uncomfortable. It was better to turn her head and look at Lord Feng. Yun Nuoshing lowered his head and drank his tea. He did not listen to the words of those people at all. Feeling her gaze, he could not help but tilt his head and look at her. What's wrong? Jing Yuanji shook her head. Yun Nuoshing stared at her and blinked. What do you mean by what I said just now? Jing Yuanji was stunned. She wanted to shake her head to show that she was just looking at him. He opened his mouth and said faintly, when the group of people appeared, those 3 guys communicated with someone. I did not know who they were communicating with, but I intercepted the voice transmission. It seemed that they wanted to use their position as void overlords to trouble us. The other side even agreed. I hate trouble. Jing Yuanji let out a long oh. So that was it. Then she frowned. But we did not know many people when we came to this part of the void. Who would want to target us? Yun Nuoshing put down his teacup and looked at Frost, who was curled up and sitting next to him. He responded, It's not Frost. It's just. Gu Zhongming looked up. The spring of star essence. Ning Fei nodded. Many people know about this stuff. Those overlords will also look for it. Troublesome, really troublesome. Yun Nuoshing could not help but sigh. His physique was already troublesome enough. This area was full of people looking for trouble. Chapter 1544. Yun Nuoshing listened indifferently as the conversation went in one ear and out the other. There was nothing worth paying attention to until the youth from the Soul Traversing Academy mentioned something about a fragment that had something to do with the war ruins. Only then did Yun Nuoshing perk up and look at Jing Yuanji and the rest. As expected, they all sat up straighter. The rest of the people in the pavilion who were listening to them were even more attentive. The opening time of the ruins is shorter than any other time. The space itself is filled with violent elements that cannot be calmed down. There should be a foreign object in the depths of this space that has affected this space that has been dormant for countless years. This is what we said before. Now we have glimpsed part of the truth. The foreign object does indeed exist in the depths of this space. It is in the depths of this space, and we have glimpsed it through a small spatial crack. It is a fragment that is entangled with the rules of a void region. It has some kind of magical power that is more powerful than any power that we have ever known. We suspect that the fragment itself is related to a void event, and it may have happened quite a long time ago. The youth in the one-shoulder cape waved his hands as he spoke. The other people standing beside him also spoke softly and added on from time to time. The duration of this space is not known, but according to past experience, the shorter the opening time, the less time we have left. Everyone is sitting here, and we all know why we are here, so let's not talk too much. That place is very dangerous, and even we can't break through it by ourselves. The space we have found this time may just be a passage to the next space. No one in this void region knows how far we are from the destination, let alone us. The only thing we can do is to go forward and explore, and never retreat until we reach the destination. The young man clenched his fists, and his clear voice echoed throughout the pavilion. There was a sense of conviction in it. It's still not enough to rely on the strength of the few of us. The only chance is to combine everyone into a force and break through the layers of sealed spaces together. Of course, if you don't want to be here, you can ignore us. If you want to provide some information but don't want to break in together, you can exchange information with us. We've found some pretty good places in these spaces, so it's not a problem if you want to exchange information with us. No matter what, we will not return empty-handed from this trip. After the youth in the one-shoulder cape finished speaking, there was a commotion in the pavilion. Many people looked at each other, and their eyes flashed as if they were calculating their own little abacus. Yun Nuoshing could not help but shake his head. The youth's words were very pertinent and had a little bit of power. However, the life forms sitting here were all at the top of the hierarchy. Well, except for the people they brought with them. Those who could survive to this point in the void must have their own world and their own abacus. It was still unknown how much of an effect the words of this person from the Soul Fairy Academy would have. At the very least, it would not work for them. By the way, who are these people? Yun Nuoshing suddenly asked. Seeing Yu Qi spit out water, he laughed awkwardly and scratched his head. I only know that they are from the few families in the void, but I have no idea who they are. Yu Qi took out a handkerchief and wiped the water off his face. Thinking about how they said they did not know anything about the void, and then seeing how Gu Zhongming and the others were calm as if they had expected this, he was no longer shocked. He cleared his throat and said, "The one who spoke is the person in charge of the Soul Fairy Academy. It is the same for the other families. Yes, they have all come in person. They are not doppelgangers, energy carriers, or carriers of laws. They have come in person." Gu Zhongming grinned. "So, Mr. Feng, you just stood up and brushed him off. That is why everyone is so quiet." Yun Nuoshing nodded nonchalantly. He glanced at the few people and could not help but mutter, "They are just a few people who have not left the mark of breaking through to the primeval realm." Ning Fei and the others automatically ignored this big shot's nagging. They thought about the words of the young man from the Soul Fairy Academy. After thinking for a moment, Ning Fei said, "It has always been a theory that a foreign object is stuck in the depths of the ruins. I did not expect it to be verified here. Some kind of fragment that contains a huge amount of law power," Gu Zhongming muttered. After a moment, he looked at Yu Qi. "You have been wandering in this space for many years. Have you thought of anything? For example, have you seen something before?" Yu Qi touched his gloomy face and shook his head. "No, this space is the limit of what I can cross. No, maybe I have been to a deeper space before, but I have no way to distinguish it. I am not that lucky. I am not that lucky to see a crack in the deeper space. I am not that lucky to see what is in the deeper space through the crack. I am not that lucky to see what is in the deeper space." Yun Nuoshing listened to his paranoid nagging and asked, "You think there is a trap?" "I am not sure." Yu Qi shook his head and looked up at the leaders of the Void clans who were still talking about something. The atmosphere in the pavilion was slightly livelier as everyone was discussing what happened just now. Yu Qi lowered his head and took a sip of tea. If they dare to say this, then it must be true. But if they really want to say that it was luck or something like that, they can't lie. They must have found out about this through other means. Min looked up. "They also have people in this space." Yu Qi nodded. "Of course, but I don't know who it is. There are only a few hundred people in this space. I have seen most of them. It can't be. Actually, it is possible that they are in the part that I have not seen before." The voices in the pavilion gradually grew louder and louder. The families of the Crossing Soul Institute were discussing, and not long after, they left. Listening to the last words they said before leaving, it seemed like they had agreed on a time, which would be around a few hours later. "We have a few hours to prepare. Do we need to prepare as well?" Yu Qi tilted his head and looked at Yun Nuoshing to ask for his opinion. Logically speaking, since they heard this when they came here, they should know. Minyu shook his head. Yu Qi was stunned. Just as he was about to speak, he saw Yun Nuoshing also looking at him. He said word by word, "We'll go by ourselves." A moment later, Yu-Chi climbed up from under the table. He patted his messy robe and looked at Minyu with a confused expression. What did you just say? Yun Nuoshing took a sip of tea and said calmly, We will go by ourselves. There is no need to gather with those people. It is troublesome, very troublesome. Yu-Chi was speechless. Although he liked to enjoy working alone, the premise was that they had to be able to do it well. If the people from the Soul Fairy Academy could not do it even if they worked together, they would only end up wasting their time if they joined forces. Actually, he wanted to say these words, but looking at Yun Nuoshing's calm and indifferent look, he didn't know why he couldn't say it. There was a mysterious aura on his body, and he always felt that nothing could stop him. Min looked up at Yun Nuoshing. His eyes reflected Yun Nuoshing's face. He seemed to know what he was thinking. Do you think those people can't go to the deepest space even if they work together? Yun Nuoshing grinned and nodded gently. I just said that not long ago. I don't know if you have forgotten. This is a 4th rank area. Everyone was stunned. They subconsciously poked at the magic circle in their souls. It was still operating stably, protecting them. Yun Nuoshing looked at the pavilion with a faint smile. 4th rank, huh? This space has just completed the order transformation not long ago. Everywhere is not completely stable. There are still many unsafe, very unsafe places. Even people at the peak of origin can fall into those places if they are not careful. Moreover, the deeper you go into a space like this, the more unstable it becomes. I just took a look inside. The level of the space inside is higher, probably at level 7 or 8 of origin. There are 2 types of order there, and the power of the 4th order and the order level are still fighting for control there. The change of order in this war ruin is from the outside to the inside, and according to what we've discovered, the outermost circle is the space we're in right now. Even this space has 1/10 of it that's not completely stable. How stable do you think the inside will be? Yun Nuoshing could not help but put his hand to his forehead and chuckled. The people here are indeed a force to be reckoned with. Putting aside whether they can find the way or not, they can indeed go deeper into the space. At most, they should be able to go to the place where the battle between the 4th rank and other level 8 powers is the fiercest. However, this is a one-way trip. The more unstable a 4th rank place is, the more unstable factors there are. The time they can use is absolutely unstable. Those at the peak of origin might be chased out of the normal order within an hour, or it might not change for 10,000 years. Without a method like mine to seal the level of order, if one of them goes, haha. If all of them go, they will all die. Yu-Chi, Guzhongming, and the others broke out in cold sweat. They had underestimated the 4th order. It was a brand new order that they had never seen before. Its status was equivalent to the order that operated in the orderly void. The non-order that surged in the chaotic void was a macroscopic factor. How could it be so easily understood? If they wandered around in this brand new big environment, they would not even know how they died. Moreover, this big environment was not stable at all. Running around in that kind of place was no different from surfing in the void ocean. One wave and they would be gone. However, I will find a way to stop them. Yun Nuoshing took a sip of tea and said calmly. Pfft. Yu-Chi and the relatively calm Guzhongming both spat out a mouthful of water. They looked confused and confused. Jing Yuanji and the others thought for a moment and understood. Feng Qinghuang said, You plan to keep it and pack it up when the time comes? Yun Nuoshing rubbed her head and nodded with a smile. He saw the puzzled look on Gu Zhongming and the others' faces. Although he wanted to dump all the troublesome stuff like the abyssal death mist at the front line of the void, those things were just too complicated and troublesome. It was troublesome. He decided to put it simply. I mentioned to you before that there is a big problem in our void territory. Even if we gather all our forces there, it is not enough. I plan to solve the inexplicable seal of your void territory and pack it up and throw it over there. Yuchi and the others let out a long "oh" and could not help but roll their eyes. This was a large-scale abduction, and it was the kind that did not allow for discussion. Yun Nuoshing thought for a moment and felt that something was wrong. That's not right. In fact, this void territory is also in the upper plane. When the time comes and we solve this inexplicable isolation and seal, this void territory will also appear in the upper plane. Pfft, I don't even need to pack it up. It will appear directly. Then it will be fine. Gu Zhongming and the others smiled bitterly. Ning Fei pondered and said, Mr. Feng, we are following you. It is not good for us to say anything. There is one thing that I am worried about. If we forcefully drag people from another void territory into this, I am afraid. Yun Nuoshing knew that they were worried. He had already thought about it and threw it aside. As for why, no one can escape. In this void, in this 8 elements realm, no one can avoid this battle. When Min mentioned the matter of the abyss of death mist, her beautiful face became a bit gloomy. She was already cold, but now it looked like a blizzard was about to fall. No one can avoid it. Everyone, it is just a matter of who dies first and who dies later. We don't want to die, so we fight. There are even more people who don't want to die. They are all fighting. They all fight. This is the most real problem. This is the most direct problem. Yun Nuoshing spread out a hand and said, just as Min said, this is a matter of life and death for all of us. Not to mention that we are just separated by a strange void region. Even if we are separated by an entire primordial realm, those guys over there can still wipe out this place. Do you believe me? The only difference is that we will die first, and this place will die later. In the end, we will all die together. Yun Nuoshing stretched and held the back of her head with both hands. She said in a nonchalant tone, there is no need to say anything else. It is useless. It is not like I have not tried death before. It is not like I have not died before. I will get used to it. At worst, I will walk into the reincarnation road and start over again. I will leisurely wander around for a few more days. But what about the other people in this void? When they face death, they will not be like me. Most people will instinctively resist death. The same goes for ordinary life forms and even the higher life forms. So we chose to fight. Yun Nuoshing took a deep breath. Feng Qinghuang poured him a cup of tea. She took a sip and said, it should be the same for this void area. Of course, there might be other situations, but it doesn't matter. After everything is set up, I will announce everything to the public and ask for answers. If anyone is willing to fight, I will bring them all over and leave the rest behind. Anyway, we have all been released by then. I don't want to waste time on correcting other people's thoughts. After they see the reality, they can do whatever they want. As for the ones that I think have the potential to cause trouble, seeing that Feng Qinghuang's face suddenly turned gloomy and she stopped talking, Gu Zhongming asked curiously, and then? Yun Nuoshing chuckled and said, of course, it is the destruction of the gods. Dragging a piece of the void and burying it in the void. A pit of 10,000 people. No, a pit of 10,000 gods. Just thinking about it makes me excited. Yuchi and the other 2 felt a chill run down their spines. This was really decisive. But it was also true. If there really was a battle of that level, and they needed to control the situation, they really couldn't allow people to cause trouble to exist. It was better to crush those things into nothingness beforehand. Those who are from the lawful faction, and yet they stab us in the back, they should just stay at home and wait for the destruction to come. Yun Nuoshing let out a long breath. When they were almost done with their conversation, many people had already left the pavilion. Some of them even glanced at Yun Nuoshing and the others before they left. Their eyes flashed with ridicule, as if they wanted to see some people get into trouble. Let's go. Yun Nuoshing waved her hand and stood up. She carried Frost on her back and walked towards the door. It was time for them to go and take a look at the void. As for that void, They should be able to go there without that thing, although it would take some effort. My friend, please wait. Just as Yun Nuoxing and the others walked to the door of the pavilion and were about to leave, a voice suddenly sounded from behind them. Suddenly, their vision became blurry. In a flash, they appeared in another void. Yun Nuoxing was stunned. The void in front of her changed from a street to a chaotic temporary void. It was a void that had not been created yet and was used temporarily. In the void, there was no hostility for the time being. There was no other energy. She judged the person to be neutral. Then, she should be here to talk to them. She calmly turned around and saw the young man with a cloak slowly walking over from behind. He was alone, so he was not on guard. He looked at Yun Nuoxing and nodded. Then, he cupped his hands and said, "My name is Emohi. It was rude of me to forcefully drag you into my void domain. Please forgive me." Yun Nuoxing looked at him with a faint smile. "My surname is Feng. I am a man. I am the manager of the Soul Traversing Academy. May I know why you are looking for me? If you want to talk about that void domain, you don't have to say anything." Before Emohi could speak, he was stunned when he heard this. His expression changed slightly. "Mr. Feng, are you not interested in that void domain? That fragment?" Yun Nuoxing shook his head, causing Emohi to stare blankly, making him feel a bit confused. "There are some things that I advise you to give up on. This is advice, not a threat. With your strength, your strength is still passable. If you gather the strength of everyone in the ancient city, it won't be a problem for you to do as you please in this void region, but no." Yun Nuoxing crossed his arms. Since he had decided to pull these lost fellows back from the void domain, it would be good if he said a few more words to dispel the manager's thoughts. He did not mind saying a few more words. There is a hidden threat in this void domain that you are completely unaware of. That's right. I can tell from the way you are standing in this void domain. You do not understand what you are facing at this moment. If you rush into the void domain like this, I am afraid that none of you will be able to come back. Emohi was still frozen on the spot with his hands cupped in front of his chest. His expression was a little unnatural. Before he could say anything, his ears were stuffed. When he finally came back to his senses, he saw Yun Nuoxing's serious expression. He felt that what Yun Nuoxing said was probably true, but he was a little unwilling to accept it. "Fourth rank," Yun Nuoxing suddenly said, startling Emohi. He frowned. "What's fourth rank?" I am being rude. You don't know." Yun Nuoxing shook his head. He waved his hand and drew a circle in the void domain in front of him. He weaved a magic circle the size of a palm and gently pushed it to float in front of Emohi. "I know that you are unwilling to accept it, or that you don't believe it. This is not a problem. Take this and put it anywhere. Go to your destination. It will tell you everything, and you will understand what I said today. If you still have the courage to continue forward after knowing everything, take this and come to me alone. I will wait for you in the deepest part of the void domain. You don't have to send us off. We can get out." Lost fellows. Emohi stared blankly at the small and exquisite magic circle in his hand. His mind was full of questions. When he looked up, the group of people who had been standing in front of him just now had already disappeared. This made him feel a little scared. This temporarily constructed void domain also had the power of godly right. They had left his void domain so casually. This person is unusually dangerous. Emohi put away the magic circle and turned to walk toward the void domain behind him. His expression was a little strange. He still had to go inside and see for himself. If what he said was true, there should still be a way out. Chapter 1545. Groups of ancient altars were laid out like a huge carpet that extended forward. Some of the altars were very old, full of cracks, broken parts, and some were even missing some parts. They looked like things that were dug out from a garbage dump, leaving behind mottled traces of vicissitude. It was full of the aura of time. Yun Nuoshing suspected that a considerable part of this large group of altars could no longer be used, and were just put out to make up the numbers. The endless carpet of altars was filled with a considerable amount of energy. A tremendous amount of power of order and laws gathered in the area, as if all the energy in the entire star region had been drawn here. Yun Nuoshing and the others stood at the very front of the array of altars and raised their heads to look at it. It was the entrance to a chaotic spatial tunnel. Layers of vortexes collapsed from the edges towards the center. A single glance at it would make one feel like they had fallen into a cycle of reincarnation. This thing was probably as tall as 1,000 miles, and it was very spacious. It was like a vortex had squeezed out from a spatial crack, and then expanded the crack quite a bit. It did not have any thickness, and from the side, one could only see a thin line. It was like an energy projection that only existed on the level of space and rules, and did not appear in the real world. It would take a little more effort to open it. Yuchi looked at the distorted spatial tunnel before looking at the array of altars behind it. He said, "Although I knew they were prepared, I never expected them to be so extravagant. The power gathered by these altars should be enough to shatter this entire space, right?" Yun Nuoshing turned to look at the altars. They were set up by the void overlords of the Soul Traversing Academy. They were gathering power to deal with the spatial tunnel in front of them. It looked like a tunnel, and in fact it was indeed a spatial tunnel. It was just that it was also a barrier. A large amount of chaotic energy gathered here had combined the spatial barrier and the tunnel into one. To break it open, they would probably need to gather a considerable amount of peak origin attacks. That was why he and the others had made such preparations. It was just that these altars looked a little unsettling. Well, he did not plan to use them anyway. Who knew if those altars with missing limbs could be used? Although they were still accumulating energy, it would be fun if they did not shatter the spatial barrier when they were activated and instead blasted themselves into the void. It would be exciting to accidentally break into the void in this chaotic fourth-rank dominating place. The blood essence of many people has gathered on these altars. A few of them have concentrated energy carriers similar to ours. Master Feng, there might be people in this void who will become energy life forms. Jing Yuanji looked away from the altars and smiled at Yun Nuoshing. "Oh!" Yun Nuoshing responded. He had indeed sensed a similar aura from those altars. He could not help but laugh. "Then let's look forward to seeing who has such ability. After leaving the Pantheon realm, I haven't seen many self-transformed life forms and cultivated into energy life forms." The few of them stopped and waited. After about 5 minutes, Gu Zhongming and Ning Fei arrived one after the other. As soon as they appeared, they shook their heads at Yun Nuoshing. Gu Zhongming spoke first. "They ran away. We can't catch up. They're very vigilant. When they were in the ancient city earlier, they didn't appear in the central positions. Now that they've split up, they're still quite far away." Ning Fei spread his hands and sighed. He deliberately waited for a while. When he saw Yun Nuoshing, he sighed and said, "However, there's still one discovery. That person should be in contact with the others in this space." "Oh yes, about that." At the mention of this, Gu Zhongming also had something to say. "That person seems to be one of the 10. That's what I heard in the ancient city. Now that I've seen the person's characteristics in a hurry that day, it shouldn't be wrong. The 10 people who sneaked in at the wrong time." Yun Nuoshing crossed his arms and muttered to himself for a while. "That's interesting. But even if we know, it's useless. He ran away too quickly that day. We didn't have time to leave anything on him. It's not realistic to look for him all over the starry sky now. By the time we find him, I don't know what has happened to that point of law entanglement. Maybe it's been pulled out, and everything useful has been torn to pieces. Wouldn't my efforts have been in vain then?" The woman, one of the 3 souls temporarily residing in his soul, said softly, That point of law entanglement may not have any recorded information left. The short-haired man also replied, well, that battlefield. Although there aren't many memories left, and I can't remember it clearly, that place should be one of the most tragic battlefields. In the end, many people fell there. The energy torrent had washed away the conceptual layer of law in that place. Even if the point of law entanglement is reformed, it's probably only related to what happened later. I'm afraid it won't work if you want to use it to understand what happened in that battle. Is that so? Yun Nuoshing showed a disdainful look, sighed deeply, and slowly changed the topic. But it was intercepted. When I was walking in this void, no one dared to steal from me. Ahem, never mind, let's not talk about him for now. As he spoke, Yun Nuoshing let out a long sigh. It's too troublesome and tiring to capture people all over the universe without any backup plans. Let's just focus on what we're here to do. As for that fellow who intercepted us. He paused for a moment, then waved his hand. When fate comes, we'll naturally meet again. When that time comes, we'll settle the score with him. After confirming that the good people were all present, Yun Nuoshing tied everyone with a layer of chains of order. He temporarily put Siyu, Qinyu, and the other two girls into his spiritual world. Then, he slowly took out the Nethervoid sword and began to gather energy. Yuqi sensed something and turned to look at the stars in the distance. Someone's approaching, but they won't be here for a while. The illusion I left behind can hold them off for a while. He paused and glanced at Yun Nuoshing. He mumbled. The void can't be filled with weirdos like you right now, can it? The hand holding the sword trembled slightly. Yun Nuoshing laughed dryly. I'm a special case. Don't worry about these details. I'm going to open the door. Seeing him raise the Nethervoid sword casually, Ning Fei could not help but ask, can a sword break this barrier? They've prepared so many things for the Soul Traversing Academy. It can't be that. F***CK. It's going to open. The Nethervoid sword drew a purplish-black light, and the barrier in front of them split in half. The layers of vortexes that had appeared in the starry sky like reflections had materialized as the space in front of them was torn apart. They had a volume and had really turned into a space tunnel. They could even clearly feel the aura mixed with countless chaotic energies. The wind of energy that blew past their faces seemed to contain a large amount of rather unstable sequence power. It was fourth-rank power. Yuqi's cheeks trembled. He was frightened by the fourth-rank power. The unstable sequence power inside is very dense. It seems like it really leads to a rather deep space. You're right. The space inside is very chaotic. That's right. Yun Nuoshing raised his chin proudly. I won't joke about something like this. Right, hold on tight to the magic circle I gave you. Use as much power as you can to operate the magic circle in case you run into some sort of sequence trap. Yes, it's just a name. That's what it means. Don't worry about the details. Let's go in if we're ready. Gu Zhongming and the others nodded. They walked a short distance with Yun Nuoshing. They stood in front of the tunnel and raised their head. The chaotic energy storm that was coming at them was even more violent. The space power and time power, mixed with sequence and rule fragments, were pressed against their faces in the form of lumps and rope. The chaotic feeling made them feel that their energy was a little shaky and a little unstable. Gu Zhongming gulped. Well, Mr. Feng, are we just going to jump in like this? What else can we do? Yun Nuoshing glanced at him and saw a trace of fear on his face. He lowered his head and rubbed his hair as he muttered, It will take some effort to find another space, why don't you use the one here? Moreover, I'm afraid that we won't be able to find a more stable space in a short period of time. I just looked down at the space barrier, this is already a very weak place, which is why there is such a chaotic and unstable passage. The other space barriers are as thick as city walls and have a few 100 million layers of defensive runes and divine patterns. I can also break the barrier over there, but it will be even more unstable. The process of jumping in there can save a few million words. If you don't believe me, I can open a hole for you to see. No, 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 there's no need. Gu Zhongming and the other two waved their hands and laughed dryly. They knew what the other places were like, but when they looked up at the chaotic tunnel in front of them, they couldn't help but sweat. This thing was really not that stable. They felt a little scared and a little guilty. Yun Nuoxing rolled his eyes and shook his robe. He used more chains of order and precepts, and even used the power of the observer to tie everyone up. The other end of the chains wrapped around himself and frost tightly. After that, he clapped his hands and said, "All right, I've added a lot of defense. Don't worry and jump. It'll be fine." "But, are you a man? Come, let's go in 3, 2, 1. Yun Nuoxing shouted. She pulled all the chains of order and rules and led everyone into the tunnel. Before everyone could react, they suddenly felt the world spinning. The vortex crashed in front of them. Gu Zhongming and Ning Fei were devastated. You didn't even count down for half a second. Boom! After the few of them plunged into the chaotic tunnel, the space suddenly boiled. The layers of spatial vortex seemed to have swallowed countless foreign objects and choked. One of the edges suddenly expanded several times, and then a chaotic energy torrent burst out with a bang, tearing the space from the shattered parts even more thoroughly. The energy poured out like a vast galaxy of energy, and it looked very spectacular. Most of the energy dissipated in the void, and a small part of it remained in the starry sky. The remaining energy rolled into a whirlwind on the spot and rushed into the tunnel. The roaring energy tide lasted for more than 10 seconds before gradually dissipating. The shattered space began to heal. Without Yun Nuoxing and the others blocking it, the space quickly stabilized and returned to normal. The layers of spatial vortex became in existence like an image again. It was impossible to see how thick it was or how real it was. There was no feeling of the spatial teleportation. It was as plain as ever. The moment they crossed over, they felt the power of space soar to the peak, but the moment they crossed over, it disappeared into nothingness. It was impossible to feel that feeling again. Behind them was a vast and boundless starry sky. There was no way they could see the layers of spatial vortex tunnel. Accompanied by a series of crashing sounds, Yun Nuoxing checked everyone's condition. After confirming that they were fine, she took them out from her soul. She touched them while observing the starry sky. It seems like we experienced a discontinuous spatial teleportation. Also, it seems to be one way. We can't see the teleportation tunnel we came from. Gu Zhongming let out a long sigh of relief when he did not experience the shock and horror that he expected. He also began to observe the starry sky. Which spatial level is this? Is it above? Or is it below? Or is it the surface layer or the deeper layer? According to the flow of the spatial power, we are heading inside. Yu Qi rolled his eyes at him. Wasn't this guy worried that he would get confused by talking about so many things? There's no change in the level of space. We're still in the real world, but we've walked a little deeper into the ruins. In the cold and dark starry sky, there were few distinguishing features. It was dead and lonely. There were not even many stars. It seemed to be a starry sky that was on the verge of death. It was eternally frozen at this moment. Perhaps it was already in its twilight state when it turned into a battlefield. Now, what appeared before them was just an image of destruction. Yun Nuoxing carefully sensed for a moment and said, "We've crossed a world barrier. This is a very clear boundary. We've crossed into another space. In the previous few spaces, if I didn't sense the changes in the laws of space, I would have thought that I was just passing through a starry sky. The ruins are piled up by many broken worlds. Basically, they are all bounded by spatial barriers. World barrier, or I can feel the existence of the world barrier." Ning Fei also felt the feeling of passing through the barrier. Just as he was about to wander into the spatial laws, he saw something from the corner of his eye. He quickly pointed and said, "There is something there." Yun Nuoshing and the rest turned their heads and went in that direction. It was a shining silver object. From the visual angle, it looked like a star. From the sensory angle, it should be some kind of huge energy condensation. When they were quite a distance away, Gu Zhongming saw what it was. His pupils shrank slightly. He opened his mouth and said in a shocking voice, "What the F***ck? What the F***ck?" Ning Fei was also shocked. Yun Nuoshing rolled her eyes. She knocked on the heads of Si Yu and Feng Qinghuang, who wanted to be a repeater. She saw the two girls rubbing their heads and looking at her sadly. She could not help but pinch their faces again. "Is this the storm you were talking about?" Yun Nuoshing nodded. She reached out and brushed her long hair that was messed up by the wind. "A storm zone. Ha, this scale is quite huge." The silver light was a storm that stood in the sky. It was a huge tornado that connected heaven and earth. Even though it was a few light years away, they could not see the end of it. It was like a silver tower that stood in the sky. Its height was probably measured in billions of light years. The width of the vortex at the top and bottom was even wider. It was enough to accommodate countless galaxies and star clusters. It cut off the connection between the sky and the interior, forming a world of its own. This storm was a combination of all the origin energy in the world, along with the shattered power of dimensional laws, and two types of power of order clashing here. Any peak origin energy would lose a layer of skin even if they didn't die. As for peak origin energy, that would depend on the type. For someone like him, he would be able to treat this storm that was capable of mentally and physically suppressing any heavenly god as if it was a summer breeze. It was cool. Well, it was one thing for him to not be afraid, but it was another thing for his companions to not be afraid. Even if he was not afraid, he could not prevent this space from crumbling under the ravaging of this gigantic storm. This storm. TSK. It can be ranked second among all the storms formed by the clash of order that I have seen in my life. This is only the second place. Gu Zhongming was shocked. His eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Then what is the scale of the first one? It's nothing. Yun Nuoshing twirled her fingers. Just like what I told you about the void illusory vortex, it was when the void illusory vortex was still young. At that time, a world group seemed to have floated into the silent and stable void illusory vortex. Then, the entire world group became the raw material for forming the storm zone. Just as you think, the tens of thousands of world groups became a storm zone. TSK. The disaster formed by the storm was extraordinarily huge. The entire world group of order, including all the creations in it, how much power of order and rule do you think it contained? The first thing that was destroyed by the storm was that world group. In the end, it swallowed and expanded until it engulfed half of the void domain before it was discovered by others. At that time, tens of thousands of world groups had been destroyed. In the end, I joined forces with all the rebirth state forces in that void domain and gathered an unprecedented army to suppress the storm. The scene was very tragic. Now that I think about it, it was probably filled with human lives. In any case, I don't want to see it again. It wasn't as powerful as it is now. You can't imagine how much effort it took to suppress the storm that almost affected the entire void domain. After that, 2/3 of the void domain that was swept away became the void illusory vortex. At that time, the void illusory vortex was officially named the void illusory vortex. Before that, it was just a space full of abnormalities. Because it wasn't big enough, it wasn't crowned with the name of a void. When she finished speaking, everyone's heart sank. Cold sweat broke out on their foreheads. Jing Yuanji felt that her stomach might be trembling just thinking about the scene. Don't worry, this storm can't evolve to such a large scale. Yun Nuoshing looked at everyone and smiled. This smile made them feel much more relaxed. If she had pointed out the storm with a gloomy face, they might have planned to run away. We don't have enough raw materials, and we're surrounded by fourth-rank creatures that are gradually stabilizing. It won't be able to expand to such a large extent. Without enough raw materials and space, it'll slowly shrink and eventually disappear. That area will then become a stable fourth-rank area. Jing Yuanji quietly breathed a sigh of relief. Then, she saw Yun Nuoxing rolling up his sleeves in preparation. She could not help but be stunned. "Master Feng, what are you doing? Let's go over." Yun Nuoxing pursed her lips in that direction and calmly said something that shocked Min Do. "There's something over there that I'm interested in. Moreover, there's something that Frost needs." The product formed in the crevice between the large-scale collision of two types of order and rule power is just right for Frost. "We'll have to go over there." Yun Nuoxing gave his group a full set of attributes and glided over. "Let's go. The scenery over there is quite nice." Yu Qi's cheeks twitched. "Can we not go? Look, you're someone who's been through big scenes and big storms. Commoners like us shouldn't go over there and delay our work, right? Right?" He quickly reached out and poked Gu Zhongming to get him to speak up for him. In the end, Yun Nuoxing turned around and smiled brightly. "Don't worry, I'm here. We won't die." Yu Qi laughed bitterly in his heart. They wouldn't die, but he was afraid that they wouldn't die even if they did. Chapter 1546. The interior of the storm region, howling in the starry sky, was strangely calm. After passing through the wall of storm that was like an iron bastion, one could actually see thousands of stars floating up and down. It was as if another star domain existed here. Countless large stars flickered and were extremely dazzling. Yun Nuoxing emerged from the wall of storm and looked left and right to make sure that there was nothing wrong. Only then did she suddenly leap and lead the party into the center of the storm zone, where they floated down. The entire storm has become a wall. There's actually another star system here. When Yu Qi came back to his senses, he saw another star field appear in front of him. He could not help but be shocked. If not for the chaotic silver storm wall still standing at the end of his line of sight behind him and in front of him, he would have thought that he had just crossed a space. Previously, he had only heard Yun Nuo speak of the terror of the storm area, but he had never thought that the inside would be such a normal scene. Looking back at the storm that was traveling at an unknown speed, and recalling that they had just rolled around in it, Yu Qi's face turned green. It didn't seem that normal either. This is the center of the conflict between order. Yun Nuoxing loosened the chains of order, which were no longer needed when they rushed inside. Two powers of order exist at the same time in the heart of the storm. You can feel it clearly if you sense it carefully. Look over there. Yun Nuoxing looked up. Above the star system was a colossal azure star that was spewing boundless flames like a sea of azure flames. Its colossal body that was drifting through the stars suddenly paused in mid-air and froze. Moments later, it shrank violently, so fast that they thought it was going to collapse and trigger a violent energy nova. Then, it suddenly expanded back to its original form in a few seconds, and continued to expand. In just a few moments, it had swollen more than 10 times its original size, swallowing a star in its orbit into its body. Several other stars that were slightly further away were pushed far away by the impact of its sudden expansion. Some of them broke away from their orbits and rushed into the stars, while others found a new star to attach themselves to. However, before it could stand firmly in its resting place, it was violently pushed away by the giant azure star along with its new home. That corner of the star cluster was instantly thrown into chaos. Pfft! Perhaps it was because this place was filled with a little too much rule power. The inexplicable sound made by the star could travel through the waves of rule and order fragments to the ears of Yun Nuo and the others. It was like the sound of a balloon leaking air, and not long after, the azure star really began to leak air. However, a third of its right side suddenly collapsed, collapsing into an awl. The two powers of order are clashing here. Although the center of the storm is far safer than we thought, it's not completely peaceful. Something will still happen here. Yun Nuoshing said as he looked at the star being casually changed and controlled by the two types of order forces here like a ball. The center of the conflict is originally here. It's just that the flow of energy has shifted it into the storm. Yun Nuoshing waved her hand and let her energy spread out, leaving many energy traces and marks in this place. Those marks were scattered and arranged in a certain pattern in the starry sky of the storm. Following the energy traces that were difficult to see with the naked eye, they could see the normal flow traces. It was a small storm that rotated in the opposite direction of the huge storm standing in the starry sky behind them. It was a small-scale storm of energy. There were 4 star clusters here, and 2 of them seemed to have been forcibly torn in half. They should have been one, but no one knew what kind of collision and changes in order and law had caused them to become like this. Now, the 2 star clusters looked at each other from a very far distance away. The star field in the middle was relatively empty, but there were many traces of broken roots connecting the 2 star clusters. A group of stars were left behind when the star clusters were torn apart. Some of them were still moving towards the 2 star clusters with weak energy, but the more empty area in the center no longer had any energy to borrow. Those scattered stars would stay there until they encountered the next abnormal change. If they did not delve into this, they would just use their eyes to look at the 2 star systems that were more than 1,000,000 light-years in size reaching out to each other, trying their best to get closer to each other. The burning golden light was the last trace of their struggle, but in this lonely place, this little bit of struggle could not cause the slightest impact. Why are you being so emotional? In the spiritual world, the little angel heard him muttering in his heart. She could not help but roll her eyes and complain. Living in the big environment under the control of law and order, no one can change this little change, let alone a star, a sun, or a star system. You have told me this many times before. Yun Nuoshing laughed dryly. He was just imagining things when he saw such a scene. This girl really ruined the atmosphere. Although there was no atmosphere here at all. To avoid standing there like a fool, Yun Nuoshing waved his hand and led Jing Yuanji and the others into the extraterrestrial star system isolated by the storm zone. This storm zone has existed for quite a long time. As they walked, Yun Nuoshing gradually sensed that something was not right, and his expression changed slightly. It has existed for at least tens of millions of years. An environment that tends to be limited by rules and conflicts of order. Could it be that the self-perfecting rule of this space is? He had just mentioned the 4th order not long ago, and everyone still remembered it clearly. At this moment, when they heard him mumbling, they roughly understood something. In the area formed by the 4th order, there were a lot of rule fragments and broken orders that conflicted with each other. Only under certain circumstances, those slightly similar rule fragments would collide violently and be forcibly embedded together. 2 rules that were slightly similar but not exactly the same would find a stable middle point little by little under such circumstances. In this process, many rules would be rewritten and rearranged. When they finally stabilized, what would appear in this space would be a brand new rule, perhaps completely different from the 2 previous rules. Is it time? Min raised his head and said. Yun Nuoshing nodded and reached out his hand to stroke the starry sky. He seemed to have touched something and clenched his hand tightly. After a moment, he opened his hand casually and let it go as if he was walking in the forest and accidentally caught a bird and let it fly again. The rule of time is quite stable. This has formed a self-justifying rule of time. That is why this storm zone has been stable for such a long time. It is not the scene of 2 order forces clashing here, but a living relic that has spanned the past and the present and will continue to exist. The rule of time has completely recorded the scene of the conflict of the 2 order forces that once existed here, and has been repeating the scene of the storm standing in this starry sky. Repeating the cycle of time? Feng Qinghuang asked softly. Will there be a moment where it will return to the starting point in an instant? Yun Nuoxing shook his head. This is just a recurring image of the storm of order conflict. It's a perpetual fragment of a certain period. This storm had once truly existed. It had experienced birth, evolution, stability, and death. The scene that is now frozen in front of our eyes is probably its most spectacular moment. That magical law of time has preserved its most spectacular moment. It's going around in circles, and it will never experience evolution again. It's quite stable now, and it will never die. It is like being trapped in a cage of time. Jing Yuanji's eyes flickered. So, the rule of time actually appeared after the storm zone had disappeared? Yun Nuoxing was stunned and scratched his head. I misspoke. No, I misspoke earlier. If that's the case, the storm zone did not actually meet its end. It was still in a stable stage when it encountered the law of time. Then, it kept repeating in this circle. What happened after that was just like what you said, Yuanji, it was trapped in the cage of time. It will not meet its end, but will only repeat this scene forever. What about this space that is trapped by the storm zone? Is it the same for them? Siyu asked. Yun Nuoxing frowned and did not give an answer immediately. He looked around the space with his eyes open. His expression was sometimes serious and sometimes relaxed, as if he was thinking about something very serious. Everyone glanced at him but did not disturb him. Instead, they looked at Siyu. The girl seemed to have asked a very troublesome question. Yun Nuoxing and his people landed on a star and looked up at the starry sky. It had been almost a quarter of an hour since Siyu asked the question. Strange, how can a rule of time show two situations? Jing Yuanji and the others were startled. They then lowered their heads and pondered. After a moment, they all shook their heads to show that they did not understand. A rule of time should only exist in one situation. For example, the rule of life and death. If a life followed the rule of life, it was still alive. Even if it was killed and only a fragment of consciousness escaped, as long as the rule of life was not completely annihilated, it was still alive. It was impossible for the rule of life to exist, but the person was already dead. A dark yellow color flashed across Yun Nuoxing's eyes. He looked at the starry sky and muttered, "The rule of time that belongs to this storm zone has a short time segment, repeating the situation of the storm over and over again. However, I did not feel the aura of another rule of time in this area spanning billions of light years. Logically speaking, this place should only follow the same rule of time. This starry sky and the storm should be repeating the same segment over and over again. Guess what?" Mei Mao, Jing Yuanji's eyes flashed. Her eyes caught something in the starry sky. "I seem to have seen the aura of time that belongs to this period of time?" No, the aura of time belongs to this period of time. This is normal. Even if this area has been repeating the same period of time, the sea of time has been flowing for so long. So, the aura will change. But that is not the point. Yun Nuoxing shook his head. The point is, in this galaxy there are products that have evolved in a recent period of time, just like the mark of the void that I told you earlier. If I, Fengling, was born in the 40th era, then I would be branded with the mark of that time and become one with a part of the self-rule. Although this usually makes me check how long we have lived ahem. Min instantly understood after being reminded by him. He knew after taking a look at the starry sky. It's impossible for something that repeats the same period of time to have a time mark of a recent period. These stars were all born in a recent period of time. Yun Nuoxing nodded. This starry sky follows a different law of time from this region. However, I can't find the existence of that law. The situation was similar to them living on a planet that belonged to a star cluster. The star cluster had existed for 10 billion years. In just a short while, It had gained 20 hours of time before returning to its original state. All the creations in the star cluster had experienced the same 20 hours of time before returning to zero. It was as if nothing had happened. They still had a lifespan of 10 billion years, but the planet they lived on had reached its 21st hour. It was still moving forward bit by bit, while they, who were reciprocity cultivators, could not find the reason why it continued moving forward. What a ghost story! Yuan Kong could not help but grumble in his soul. Could it be caused by the conflict between order and law? For example, this storm is just… it's just that this storm follows a certain law, while the law in this starry sky is different. There has to be a law of time. Since there are signs of time being replaced, where did the law that belonged to it go? Yun Nuoshing scratched her head. We can't find its law of time now. Yuan Kong hugged the pillow with both hands. After thinking for a while, he threw himself onto the bed and rolled around. I don't know. How would I know where the law went? Little Angel and Yun Nuoshing, the law of time had been destroyed, and time had lost its power. Without the law of time, there would be no traces of time being replaced. Was it an illusion? No, the things here were all created by the power of the natural order. They were the special natural order creation that existed in these war ruins. The creations in the other spaces also had time imprints that belonged to recent times, but it just had to be this place. Forget it, why do I have to think about this? Yun Nuoshing shook his head violently and swept away all the messy thoughts in his mind. After that, he rolled his eyes and said, We're here to find a suitable power of order and rule for Frost. We're not here to explore and decipher anything. It's not too late to do those things when we have the time. Yun Nuoshing finished and let out a long sigh. That's right. Let's go. Don't waste time here. Everyone looked at each other as he walked towards the starry sky. Jing Yuanji and Siyu looked at each other and shrugged. This was the Feng clan's way of diverting the problem. However, they also agreed. Even if they scratched their heads here, they probably wouldn't be able to understand what was going on in this space. Even if they tried their best to find it now, they might not be able to find it. Alright, that was just wishful thinking. When it came to the law and order, they, who were at the pinnacle of the origin, would occasionally have a headache. Even Lord Hui, who was in the primeval stage, always said that there were many things in the void that he could not understand. What was hidden behind might not be the truth. It could also be a deep pit. Speaking of the deep pit, Jing Yuanji could not help but look at Lord Feng. She could not help but mutter in her heart, Lord Feng's physique is fine, right? Yun Nuoshing shuddered violently and looked at the starry sky around him strangely. It was silent. There was an inexplicable law flowing in this starry sky. He could not see through it clearly. He could not help but mutter in his heart. It can't be that my physique is acting up again, right? What's going to happen this time? The sky is falling and the earth is sinking. It can't be, right? Sporadic gray energy clouds floated in this space. They might have originated from a star that had exploded. The clouds were cold and had lost most of their energy. They were pushed away by the arrival of Yun Nuoshing and the others. They landed lightly in the center of the gray star cluster. There was only a core that had completely cooled down. It had lost most of its energy and power and was suspended in the starry sky. It hung there alone. Only circles of energy clouds surrounded it. There were some blurry black shadows a little further away. They looked like shattered stars that had turned into charcoal. They had been baptized when the star was destroyed and had become dust in the starry sky. Only the grayish-black color of death was left. The extremely dense remnant had already retracted all its light. Its current appearance was proof of the passage of countless years. It was a star that had completely cooled down and had reached its final stage. At this moment, no matter how much energy was expended, there was no way to make it shine again. Let's do it here. Yun Nuoshing carefully took Frost off his back. This is the buffer zone of the conflict between the forces of order. Half of the space is in conflict. Some special products may appear in the other half. His gently waving palm moved the starry sky and attracted all the things that existed in this space to his hand. Siyu leaned over to watch him work. She felt that the space and the burned star under her feet were trembling a little. After a few steps, something appeared in the surrounding space. Broken scenes, some energy phenomena that could be described and observed by the naked eye. Yun Nuoxing saw the curious look on the little girl's face. He explained, "I'm gathering the fragments of this space and filtering them. I can collect some energy from the space that is basically in a state of chaos. As for what I can find, it depends on luck," he said as he pointed forward. Siyu and Feng Qinghuang looked in that direction. Yun Nuoxing deliberately made a part of the energy materialize. Some energy halos appeared in that place. There were blue halos, golden hollow rings, and red balls. These strange things that were defined as energy concepts appeared in that place and lit up the desolate space. Their original bodies had dissipated. Now, they were forcibly gathered together. They were just fragments of concepts and laws. Not only that, there were many things that slowly appeared in the invisible space, making themselves clearer. Siyu looked curiously at the energy concepts floating around. She curiously reached out her hand to the red ball. She knew that her hand would go through the red ball, and then she grabbed it. Feng Qinghuang was stunned when she saw this. She quickly pulled Siyu back and told Yun Nuoxing about the situation. The latter waved his hand and took the light ball. With a gentle wave of his hand, the light ball dissipated. A physical object appeared in the center of the light ball and fell into his hand. Occasionally, when I gather them, I will touch something that is hidden in the void and space. Or maybe it has already dissipated. It just happened to gather and become a physical object. Yun Nuoxing lowered his head and looked at the object. It was an irregular piece of charcoal. It looked like a crystal fragment. Even he could not guess what it used to be. Moreover, this thing had lost all its imprint. He could not get any information from it. Since this is a battlefield, this is probably a fragment of some kind of weapon? Yun Nuoxing shook the charcoal in his hand and scratched his head in confusion. He asked the three souls in his soul, but they couldn't recognize what it was. It was mainly because it didn't have any characteristics. Even ghosts couldn't recognize the original appearance of this thing. Feng Qinghuang pulled Yun Nuoxing's hand and said, "There may be other things hidden here." Yun Nuoxing thought about it and agreed. They did not encounter such wreckage in the previous few spaces. They were all created by laws. Now that they encountered some wreckage here, it seemed that they could draw something out. Chapter 1547. In the starry sky where billions of stars were flowing, numerous large stars were silently drifting in the sea of stars. In a remote corner, some thin gray nebulas were surging with a gust of wind and drifting forward. In that part of the starry sky, some things were slowly emerging from the deep space and gradually condensing into shape. The wreckage that emerged from the void was probably something that had once been destroyed by the rules and order. At this moment, Yun Nuoxing's power had reformed and regained their physical existence. They appeared under the starry sky and were picked up by him. Then, he casually threw them into a pile of trash behind him. Wreckage, fragments, wreckage, I don't know what it is. Ah, this is a piece of trash. Ah, this is a bone. Although it has been burnt into charcoal. This is an eyeball bead. Oh, something like a weapon. It's probably just a fragment. Tens of millions of light balls floated in front of Yun Nuoxing. He picked them up one by one and quickly checked them. Then, he casually threw them behind him. That arc left a black shadow behind him. He couldn't stop muttering, "Trash, trash, trash, useless wreckage, fragments that can't be seen. Fragments of fragments, trash of trash. What is this? Forget it, it's useless. This." Jing Yuanji and the others stood behind him, and watched him pick up those things quickly and throw them into the pile of trash beside them. They all had stiff smiles on their faces. Yuchi inadvertently raised his head. It wasn't until his line of sight became vertical that he saw the black pile of trash that was thousands of feet high. He said stiffly, "Why are you suddenly picking up trash in the starry sky?" The three souls floated out and rummaged around the pile of trash. Siyu and Feng Qinghuang squatted beside them to help. However, these two girls were mostly there to cause trouble. It was too difficult for them to find any trace of something that had been burnt into charcoal at their level. From time to time, Jing Yuanji would take out 1 or 2 balls of light to see what was inside, but she didn't find anything of value. Even if there were things left behind in this destroyed space, they would probably be debris left behind after the war that hadn't been cleaned up by the void. Lady Maple also knew that this was meaningless, but she still carefully checked every fragment before throwing it away. Although the speed at which she did it made it seem like she threw it away after a casual glance. About an hour had passed, and the number of rule condensations that Yun Nua planet had condensed in the starry sky was getting fewer and fewer. Sometimes, what was condensed were some rule fragments and order fragment. His focus was also gradually shifting. At this moment, he was still condensing things out of convenience. After such a long time of treasure hunting, he did not find anything. He also felt that there would not be anything new, so he began to condense rule fragments and order fragment. Siyu and the others were still rummaging through the pile of trash with the three souls. Dao Tian found it boring after rummaging for a long time, so he put down his things and went to Yun Nuoshing's side to watch him rummage through the starry sky. When everything returned to normal, the pile of trash was about half the size of a planet. Feng Qinghuang tidied it up, condensed it into a charcoal ball, and threw it into the starry sky. It really did become a small planet floating beside them. At first glance, it looked very similar to the burnt star under their feet. They were both black. Nothing at all. The female soul let out a long sigh. There was a look of disappointment on her face. I thought that I would be able to recall some things after seeing these things, but with just these soul fragments, it is indeed difficult to recall anything. The young man grimaced at her and sighed. I expected this, but I can't help but feel a little disappointed. What a waste of someone's effort. These things feel familiar, but I can't recall anything. It could only be because the memories attached to the soul are missing. The short-haired man tried his best to recall, but his mind was blank. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't recall anything. Jing Yuanji heard them and thought about it. She comforted them. There's no need to waste so much effort. Just try your best. After all, it's been so long. Perhaps the void itself wants to cover up what happened here. There's no need to be so disappointed. There will be a chance for us to find out what we should know, but if there's something we shouldn't know, she gently shook her head. The others also fell silent. What they shouldn't know had long been swallowed up by the void. What was left here was only the endless sorrow and traces of destruction brought about by the war back then. The arm that was so stable that everyone thought it was stiff suddenly trembled. The light in Yun Nuoshing's eyes faded slightly. He looked at the void in front of him with a hint of bewilderment. He couldn't help but murmur, "What's that?" Yun Nuoshing's body suddenly emitted a burst of golden light, as if the afterglow of the setting sun had ignited the fragments floating in the air and scattered around him. A faintly discernible chanting sound quietly sounded in this space. Behind him, a pair of pure white wings with a wingspan of more than 20 feet suddenly spread out. Then, a figure accompanied by a sacred golden light slowly emerged from behind him. Yun Nuoshing glanced at the little angel who suddenly appeared. He couldn't help but mutter, "This girl's appearance is really magnificent. It would be better if she had some energy." Don't be fooled by the scene. In fact, it doesn't have much energy. After all, this girl is just a support type. After the little angel appeared, she stared straight at the space in front of her. She didn't know what the unknown thing that Yun Nuoxing came into contact with was, but she had a lingering fear. She had an inexplicable feeling that even Yun Nuoxing's soul world was not safe. She instinctively came out and carried the little purple soul out. Yun Nuoxing was about to continue guiding the inexplicable thing, but when he turned around, he saw the little angel holding his hand and shaking her head at him with an abnormal expression. He couldn't help but be startled. "What's wrong with you? What made you so scared?" The little angel took a light breath and shook her head in confusion. She didn't know what that thing was either. Looking at the starry sky in front of him, the empty space in front of him was filled with fragments of rules and order. There were no more orbs of light. The things that he gathered had all been poured into the garbage ball hanging on his head. What was left? What was left? "Yung Min, get ready to defend. Step back." Yun Nuoxing turned around and smiled at the little angel. He patted her beautiful silver-white hair and said, "It's okay. Take Frost with you. Step back first." Jing Yung and Min were ready to defend and fight in an instant. Yu Qi and the others looked at each other. Although they were a little confused, they were also ready to fight. The little angel looked at him in silence for a while. She nodded and held Frost in her arms. After thinking for a while, she put the little purple soul on his head. Then, she floated back and gathered her energy to defend with Jing Yung and the others. "To be honest, you guys are making me nervous." Yun Nuoxing looked at the solid crystal barrier that was 3 meters thick. His eyes almost popped out of their sockets. "Is it necessary to be so exaggerated?" Jing Yung and the others looked at each other and laughed. Then, they nodded in unison. "Of course, the little angel in your spirit realm was scared away by the thing that you touched. Isn't that scary enough?" In the time it took for them to talk, Yun Nuoxing had accurately touched that thing. It was slowly emerging from the void or deep space, gathering, floating. Well, it was emerging. The surrounding starlight suddenly became weak and distorted. Yun Nuoxing's heart skipped a beat. He just casually grabbed something from the void. What did he get? There was an abnormal distortion in the starlight around the starry sky. It was about 10 feet in size. It distorted the light of a star. Then, there were 2 or 3 stars. The area gradually increased. A weak energy fluctuation appeared in the area. Min looked up and said to everyone with his cold voice, "Isolate the energy sensing. Solidify this area and seal it. Prepare for the energy impact." What energy impact? It sounded like an order, but Gu Zhongming and the others were used to it. They automatically ignored the tone and could not help but ask. They did not feel anything. Energy impact. Min glanced at him and repeated these words coldly, causing everyone to not know whether to laugh or cry. It was no different from not saying anything. What kind of energy impact was it? Oh, there was no need to say anything. They had also felt it. Suddenly, a huge spherical region appeared in the distorted space in front of them, and the starry sky became somewhat transparent. The void was rapidly approaching the real world, and a huge amount of energy was slowly being exposed from behind the distorted space. The entire region became a transparent shadow, and the starry sky distorted into a distorted vortex. Countless amounts of energy were converging at the center of the spherical distorted space, condensing crazily, as if to prevent something from emerging. However, this self-defense mechanism that originated from the world was not very useful, not to mention that this was already a broken world. A moment later, a hole suddenly opened in that place. Boom! A violent wind suddenly erupted from the hole that led to the starry sky, causing Yun Nuoxing's eyes to widen. He was caught off guard and was blown into a mess. His hair was pulled to the back of his head and his eyelids were about to fall out. Little Purple Soul felt that he could not grab onto his hair and hurriedly activated an energy barrier to prevent himself from being blown out. At the same time, he protected a certain observer who was distracted. It was like a storm that blew out when a space that had been sealed for hundreds of millions of years suddenly opened up. It was accompanied by some kind of indescribable energy that blew on everyone's faces. The layer of crystallized barrier that had condensed into a solid substance could not block the wind. They could all clearly feel the presence in an instant. It carried some kind of extremely chaotic presence that was comparable to the chaos in the earliest days of the Dyuan realm. This presence. Siyu had just pressed her hair. The moment she felt the presence, Mei Mao flipped over and fainted on the ground. Dao Heaven was shocked. He quickly squatted down and held Siyu in his arms. He shouted at Yun Nuoxing, "What the hell did you take out?" "Why would I?" Yun Nuoxing smiled bitterly. Seeing that Siyu had only fainted and was not seriously injured, she let out a sigh of relief. She reached out her other hand to help them. Suddenly, she saw that Feng Qinghuang's body was surging with tricolored energy. A huge shadow of a phoenix appeared. The shadow that carried the infinite power of order from the realm of gods forcefully withstood the chaotic storm. "Little star, focus on your own things. We are fine." Feng Qinghuang's firm voice resounded in his soul. Yun Nuoxing looked at her crimson eyes and nodded. He turned his gaze back to the front and condensed dark red energy in his other hand. "This girl has learned how to use the power of the realm of gods. I haven't had the time to teach her," Yun Nuoxing muttered in his heart. He couldn't help but shake his head. She probably didn't need him to teach her. She was just like him. It was a talent. With Feng Qinghuang's current strength, it was impossible for her to resist the primal chaos energy. Even Jing Yuanji and Min couldn't completely block it off. The little girl was only borrowing the unique power of order and rules of the world of gods. He wasn't worried at all. He focused on dealing with the unknown thing he took out from the void. By the time the opening had expanded to a size of 1,000 zhang, the distorted spherical space had already expanded to 1,000,000 times its original size. It was already as big as a star. All the starlight in sight had become distorted. Even the surrounding energy was boiling. It was affected by the domineering aura that was being released even before it emerged. "Come out!" Yun Nuoxing's left hand, which was surging with dark red energy, grabbed forward, and the 1,000-meter-wide hole expanded to an even larger size. A moment later, something that contained energy comparable to the primordial realm's initial chaotic state slowly appeared from behind. It slowly crawled out of the hole, and in the next instant, the energy in this part of the starry sky completely boiled. The entire starry sky and the huge storm region trembled. It was a cloud-like object that looked like the element of nirvana. Its entire body was pitch black, and azure energy arcs burst out from the center of the ball-like object with explosive sounds of energy. Then, the energy arcs circled around the object and went back into it. The energy arcs that kept bursting out made it look like an extremely unstable energy source. "What is this?" When Yun Nuoxing saw that the thing that made them stand on guard and caused the entire galaxy to seethe with excitement was a chaos cloud that was about 10 feet in size, he was stunned. "This thing has the presence of the void that was chaotic after the Great Yuan realm was created. What is this thing?" The energy was abnormally chaotic. It was not order. No, its order was more inclined to be between emptiness and non-order. It revealed to them that the realm of primordial chaos was in a state of chaos and emptiness at the same time. "Idiot! The energy in this place is about to collapse. Can't you think of a way to stabilize it?" Yuan Kong, who was hiding behind the little angel, popped his head out. He was stunned when he saw him and quickly shouted at him. Yun Nuoxing finally came back to his senses. He hurriedly used his power to suppress the unknown object that had the aura of primordial chaos. Yes, he had just named it. It was a name given by the observer. Initially, he thought that thing would be very difficult to deal with. He had even used a massive amount of origin energy and sequence power, as well as mobilizing the fourth-rank powers in the area to suppress it. In the end, it did not even manage to put up a fight. Instead, it was swarmed by the large group of energies, pinned to the ground and tied up like a dumpling. At the same time, the energy and rule system that had been boiling to the point of disintegration stabilized when the object was tightly tied up and no longer emitted any aura. It was repairing itself bit by bit along with the inexplicable rule here. Yun Nuoshing held the cloud that was surging with primordial chaos energy in his hand. His expression changed slightly, and his hands trembled a little. He was holding this thing, but now he felt that if he did not hold it or used more strength, he might not be able to take it back. Looks like there's no problem. After muttering to himself, Yun Nuoshing breathed a sigh of relief. Just as he was about to take a step forward, he felt that his feet were sealed and could not move. He looked around in confusion. His legs were still there, and the ground was fine, but he could not take a step forward. The commands his brain sent to his body seemed to be in a cycle of sending out commands, receiving commands, failing to execute and doing it again. A series of question marks suddenly appeared on his face. However, after a while, he guessed what the situation might be. He suddenly let out a low cry, and all the colors on his body faded rapidly, turning into the purest white. The aura on his body also increased abruptly, and a surge of order and rule power surged from his body. He then lifted his feet again. Yes, he succeeded this time. God knew what was going on with this thing in his hand. He could not move at all just by holding it in his hand. If this thing is thrown here, it can turn this entire star zone upside down, right? When everyone saw him hugging a ball-shaped cloud with all his strength and walking back, they were all stunned. The cloud was even bigger than his body. They saw his pair of white hands trying to hold the ball. Well, it was a little funny. What is this thing? Do you want me to help you hold it? Gu Zhongming walked up curiously and stretched out his hands to hold the ball in Yun Nuoshing's hands. Don't. It's very heavy. Hey, it's just a ball. How heavy can it be? What? F***CK. Boom. Ning Fei was shocked by the trembling voice. He could not help but turn his head and cover his face with his hands. He could not bear to look at his partner directly. When he mustered up the courage to move his hands away, he saw that everyone had retreated a distance away. Yun Nuoshing looked at the ball with an awkward expression. Below, he also turned his gaze away. Gu Zhongming's hands were around the ball. His whole body was embedded in the ground with the ball face down. A human figure was imprinted on the ground of this black burning star. It looked like he was slapped into the ground by something. He looked like a flattened shrimp. Yun Nuoshing walked up awkwardly and used the greatest strength he could use in his life. Probably because he used too much strength, he easily lifted the ball this time. It was probably not as heavy as it actually was. Its weight came from its own content and existence. That part was too big, so it looked so big. It was definitely the heaviest thing he had ever seen in his life. If he did not use this form and source energy, he might not be able to carry this thing away. Ning Fei walked forward with a bitter smile and dug a certain silly person out of the ground. He put him on his back and smiled bitterly at everyone. He fainted. Everyone. If one's own content and existence are not as big as it is, there is no way to bear its weight. Yun Nuoshing held the ball in front of everyone. Seeing that he was forced to maintain his strongest form, he was also shocked by the thing with the original aura of chaos. Jing Yuanji carefully stretched out her jade finger and poked the ball. She could feel its weight, even though there were tens of thousands of seals and energy suppression. Even a light touch made her jade finger hurt. She looked a little surprised and doubtful. What is this thing? The original chaos. The one who spoke was not Yun Nuoshing, but the three souls that slowly floated over. Yun Nuoshing and the others heard it and felt that there must be a story behind it. They all turned to look at the three people and prepared to listen to the story. The thing in your hand is the chaotic form of the great Yuan realm when it was first born. It is a complete entity, not a fragment. The woman looked at Yun Nuoxing and said softly. She then looked at the other two people. The young man and the short-haired man lowered their heads and pondered for a while. Then, they spread their hands together. That's it. Everyone! Are you King kidding us? They were prepared to listen to the story. They thought that they would hear a series of things that happened around this strange thing. In the end, they only heard a short explanation, and then, nothing? Seeing the helpless look on the three people's faces, Yun Nuoxing and the others could not help but smile bitterly. They could not blame them. They were three souls that only had part of their souls and memories. It was already good enough that they could remember the name of this thing. They could not ask for more. Chapter 1548. The primordial chaos was the appearance of the void during that period of time after the creation of the great primordial realm and before the great primordial realm was divided into 8 parts. It was a mixture of blank order and non-order, and was in a state of evolution towards order. The cloud of chaos was squirming restlessly. Electric arcs of energy were constantly emerging, flashing and returning to the interior. The cycle repeated. No matter how much they struggled, they could not get out of the circle. They just kept spinning and circulating. The cloud of mist inside was constantly trembling, as if it was nurturing something. Its name and its own characteristics gave Yun Nuoxing and the others a strong intuition. It was so strong that they really felt that this thing was undergoing some kind of change. But in fact, the primordial chaos that had left the original environment was still in a frozen and dead state. It was not very useful. But I can make it come to life. But what kind of change it will produce, whether it will be good or bad, it's hard to say. Yun Nuoxing raised the ball above her head with her right hand. After a while, she felt that this posture was a little silly. She shook her hand and threw the primordial chaos on the ground. With a bang, a deep pit was created. Coincidentally, if this thing is really the primordial chaos, then the things I found earlier can be considered as a waste of effort. Yun Nuoxing paused for a moment. She pinched her hair and said, "Well, not really. The things that I collected earlier can be of some use. But with the primordial chaos, those things can become medicinal catalysts." Jing Yuanji's expression changed slightly. "Are you planning to use the source of chaos on Frost?" "Yes, Master." "You're going to use it on Frost?" Yun Nuoxing subconsciously reached out her hand to press on Frost's long blue and white hair. After a moment, she felt that something was wrong and quickly withdrew her hand. Looking at Jing Yuanji and the others' slightly strange eyes, Yun Nuoxing smiled awkwardly and put on a serious expression. She nodded and said, "For other people whose structural rules, life forms have been stabilized, this thing is not very useful. Well, it should be said that for people in the above 3 situations, it would take a little effort to use something like the primordial chaos that can be evolved and changed. It's about the same as having to do a horse stance and do Tai Chi before eating a treasure of heaven and earth. Well, that's what it means. For people whose self-form has been stabilized and has been changed to the appropriate level along with their realm, external stimulation is not the best way to change it again. However, for a special case like Frost, nothing in her body has been stabilized. Her structural rules are missing, and her life form are slightly unstable. The artificial primordial chaos, it's really harmful." Yun Nuoxing shook her head and smiled faintly. Her voice was mixed with indescribable helplessness and pity. Frost looked up and stared at Yun Nuoxing with her pair of dark blue eyes. After a moment, she tilted her head and showed some confusion on her pretty face. She could understand that they were talking about her, but she did not understand what they were talking about. Yun Nuoxing smiled at her. Suddenly, his expression changed slightly. He frowned. After a long while, he hesitantly squatted in front of her and looked into her eyes. "Wait a minute. He did not know how to tell her this. His sympathy for the primordial chaos was his own damn business. It had nothing to do with the little girl herself. What if, forget it. Yun Nuoshing shook his head and reached out to touch Frost's head. He said, "We agreed before that I would take you out to play. You have to listen to me. Do you remember?" Frost tilted her head and smiled faintly. She nodded slightly. Yun Nuoshing said, "You don't have to be nervous no matter what happens later. You helped me. Since I said that I would take you out to play, I will definitely take you to the place you want to go. If you don't know where you want to go, I will take you to the void until you are satisfied. You don't even have to believe me. You just have to believe what I said." Frost frowned slightly in confusion. She could not understand the situation where she did not believe him but believed what he said. However, she thought that she just had to listen to him, so she nodded again and sat there obediently. It feels like he is trying to trick an inexperienced little girl. Yuan Kong looked at this scene and could not help but mutter. He was hit by the hand of the little angel and fell silent. Yun Nuoshing stood up and breathed a sigh of relief. That's right. This was his damn business. He was the one who forced himself to do it. Why should he hesitate at this juncture? He was not afraid of anything. He did not have to care about anything. As for what Frost would think and think after this, he would talk about it later. After all, it was the result of his willful actions. No matter what the result was, he would bear it alone. For whose good? He could not bring himself to say this. This was just his selfishness. He did not ask for Frost's opinion and acted on his own. He just wanted to do this. Perhaps there was a little thought in his heart that it was for her good. However, it was more likely that it was because of the guilt and obsession in his heart that originated from someone else. That was all. However, this primal chaos. Let him think about it. This thing had to be like this first, then this, and finally this. Jing Yuanji and the others watched as Yun Nuoshing suddenly turned around and fiddled with the cloud of chaos. The energy in his body surged, and he used dozens of types of energy to toss it around. Strange clanging sounds rang out, and the energy of the primal chaos surged and boiled here. Dozens of colorful energies surged, and after a while, he knocked down a palm-sized fragment from above. He let out a long sigh of relief. Then this, and this, without stopping, he began to split and analyze the energy that he had just collected. He kept muttering as he merged the palm-sized fragment and the product of the conflict between the two forces of order into the primal chaos cloud. Everyone could not help but curiously come forward to see what he was doing on the spot. They did not know what it was, but his technique was quite amazing. It's done. Yun Nuoshing breathed a sigh of relief. He was holding a ball of primal chaos cloud in his hand. There was no change. There was no change on the outside. As for the changes on the inside, well, they could not tell. Yun Nuoshing looked at the ball a few more times worriedly. He carefully adjusted the ball in his hand a few more times. After making sure that there was no problem, he walked to Frost. After a few fiddles, he compressed the thing into a thumb-sized bead. It was still releasing energy arcs to the outside. There were crackling sounds of explosions. At first glance, this thing looked like some kind of secret that would not be taken out even if it was placed in a small box with a void sticker stuck on it. It looked very dangerous. When they saw the whole process of Yun Nuoshing fiddling with this thing, they wondered if it would explode on the spot in an instant if it was stuffed into their bodies. Well, their brain had drifted a little too far. From the name and the upcoming use of this thing, they felt that it was not very safe. Their brain could not stop itself from drifting around the world. Eat it and sleep. Everything will be fine. Yun Nuoshing looked at Frost with an unusually serious expression and nodded seriously. Frost took the energy bead that had been condensed and compressed countless times. He looked at it for a moment and swallowed it without hesitation. Then, he obediently lay down on the ground beside him. After a while, his breathing became even and he really fell asleep. That's too obedient. Siyu's pretty face twitched. It's good. It's easy to deal with. It doesn't take too much effort. Yun Nuoshing put on Frost's hood and let out a long sigh of relief. There should be no problem when he wakes up. The primal chaos will continue to evolve towards the side of order. It should be able to make up for some of the hidden disadvantages of the primal chaos and order. But if he continues to sleep, Feng Qinghuang said, at least a few days, at most 100 years? Something like that. Yun Nuoshing nodded and let out a long sigh. The perfection and repair of order was related to one's own laws. It was not so easy to fix it. Moreover, he had already reached the origin realm. It was even more troublesome to fix something like innate or primary condition. It would take a lot of time and effort. If he did not encounter the primal chaos, Yun Nuoshing planned to use 100 years to fix it. And that was under the condition that he found enough fragments of order and laws in the war ruins. If it was not enough, he could only extend the time. Then now. Yun Nuoshing turned around and looked at the huge mass of primordial chaos that had smashed a hole in the ground. He had just used a lot of it and it did not affect its size at all. What should we do with the rest of this thing? It's a pity to throw it back. We spent so much effort to find it from the void. Siyu patted the primal chaos and suddenly thought of something. She turned to Yun Nuoshing and said, "Little star, why don't you eat it?" Everyone was speechless. Yun Nuoshing was stunned and lowered his head to think about the feasibility. As he thought, he muttered, and what he said made everyone sweat profusely. Actually, if you really want to say it, it's possible. Although my life form is an energy life form, because of the elements of nirvana, it hasn't. Or rather, it won't be completely fixed. Yes, it hasn't been fixed. It just makes my current life form be fixed in this situation, and it will still change if I encounter any situation in the future. For example, the origin energy that I encountered now. If I use the origin energy and use the origin of chaos and the elements of nirvana, I might be able to take a few more steps forward. It's a good idea. Everyone was shocked. Jing Yuanji hurried forward and said, "Lord Feng, please reconsider." As she said that, she hurriedly gave the little angel a look. The latter saw it and gave her a helpless look. Once Yun Nuoshing entered this state of thinking, no one could stop him. At most, they could say a few words to stop him from thinking, but he would still be thinking inside. It's fine, it's fine. Yun Nuoshing thought that Jing Yuanji was worried that he would fall into a deep sleep. He waved his hand and said, "I won't fall asleep. I'm not like Frost. She needs to sleep, because there's a problem with her self-created rules. As for me, I just need to make some subtle adjustment. Of course, there will still be some small changes at the beginning. Let's not delay." Jing Yuanji was shocked. Before she could stop Lord Feng, he had already walked to the primal chaos and started to get busy. Dozens of primal chaos surged forward. Wrapped in dark red energy, they surged into the primal chaos cloud. The black cloud was dyed with many colors. Then, it quickly settled down and all of it settled down in the center. Siyu looked at the scene and suddenly glanced at Feng Qinghuang. This scene was just like the day she came. When she was breaking out of the cocoon, Little Star also took a lot of things that were hard to see and threw them into her cocoon. The more she threw, the more energetic she became. That was the Feng family's unique pampering. Looking at it now, it seemed like some kind of strange innate talent. As she thought about it, she remembered. She took out a treasure from her bracelet and stuffed it into her mouth like a snack. She even took out another one and held it in front of Feng Qinghuang. "Oh, do you want it?" A moment later, the two girls squatted on the ground and ate snacks while watching him play with the black cloud ball. It was already stuffed with a lot of strange things. Among them, the primal chaos energy was the most abundant. It was not that troublesome to just inject energy into it. There was also no need to make so many strange noises. The main thing was to get rid of the primal chaos energy. It was some kind of invisible product that was caused by the conflict between the Fourth Order and two other orders in this space. It was troublesome to get rid of those things. Although he had the idea of using it to do some extreme and strange things, he did not want to deviate from his original path. Naturally, he had to put in some effort. After waiting for a while in this lonely and strange galaxy, Min waved and headed to other parts of the galaxy. As if he had seen something, Yu Qi dragged Ning Fei and the unconscious Gu Zhongming and wandered around nearby. They touched the order and fragments that belonged to this space. The magic circle in their souls that temporarily merged with each other prompted them to search for something on their own. It seemed to be able to perfect their own order and rules. It seemed to be able to make them more immune to the Fourth Order. They could also borrow the order and power in this space without being too seriously corrupted. About an hour later, Yun Nuoxing stared at the colorful cloud ball in her hand for a long time. It had shrunk to the size of half a head. Finally, she let out a long sigh of relief. All right, it's done. Jing Yuanji and the little angel came up to take a look. The ball with the primal chaos energy was now tainted with a lot of sacred order power. The energy that originated from that time period had completely brought the aura and power of order to it. The non-order nature of the primal chaos and the order of the primal chaos had merged into order and emptiness. It would evolve further towards order. As for what it would evolve into, it was hard to tell. Don't be fooled by its smaller size. It's actually the same size as before. It's just compressed. Tossing the ball in her hand at them, Yun Nuoxing reached out and said, "Do you want to touch it?" The girls quickly shook their heads and waved their hands. Gu Zhongming was still unconscious after being smashed, so they did not want to join in the fun. Yun Nuoxing looked at the little angel and said, "You shouldn't be able to feel that unusually dangerous repulsive aura now, right?" The little angel frowned. She was already shocked when the primal chaos energy had not fully emerged. But now it seemed to be fine. There's still a little, but it's acceptable. It won't affect us much. Alright, then there's nothing to worry about. Yun Nuoxing nodded and held the colorful cloud of chaos with both hands. He took a deep breath and brought it closer to his chest bit by bit. Then, he slowly stuffed it into his chest. The whole process was actually very fast. There were no obstructions, accidents, screams, or anything like that. He easily stuffed the ball of light into his chest. Then, Yun Nuoxing looked up at the little angel and took a deep breath. Burp, everyone was speechless. Was she full? Scratching her head, Yun Nuoxing waved her hand. Don't worry about it. It seems like the change won't happen so quickly. He casually raised his head and stared at the starry sky. Suddenly, his expression became strange and a little shocked. How big is the largest law fragment you've ever seen? Min and Yu Qi, who had just sensed the commotion, came back. Hearing this, they thought for a moment and expressed what they had seen. It's at most the size of a planet, right? Yu Qi waved her hand. Law fragments are easily captured and destroyed by the void. In the real world, there aren't many that haven't been taken away by the void in time. As for the ones in the void, it's even rarer. Min nodded. I've only seen half the size of a planet. Jing Yuanji, I'm about the same. This probably won't happen because we're in the realm of the gods. Of course, this is excluding the case of world fragment. After all, world fragments are the largest law fragments, and there are countless complex laws inside. Well, of course, world fragments aren't included, so... Yun Nuoxing looked up and pointed upwards. Spots of dark yellow energy appeared at his fingertips and turned into a beam of energy that shot out. What we're seeing now is a new record. Everyone stared blankly for a moment. Following his gaze, they raised their heads bit by bit. Their vision gradually pulled away to a very distant place. Following the dark yellow energy beam that swept across the endless starry sky, it finally stopped at the edge of the 10 billion light-years galaxy that was enveloped by the storm zone. Suddenly, it exploded, bringing with it countless golden energy light spots that scattered across the starry sky. As their eyes followed the illumination of those energy fragments, they gradually caught sight of something transparent, something that emerged from the background of the starry sky with a golden radiance. That was the Sea of Time. No, not the Sea of Time, but a fragment of time with the presence of time. No, that's an entire law fragment. A fragment with the law of time. Yun Nuoshing pulled his hand back. Found it. The second law of time in this place. The entire starry sky within the storm zone is attached to this time fragment, which is why it can continue to flow forward. That's why it's different from the time in the storm zone. The scattered energy fragments flowed across the starry sky, illuminating the night sky bit by bit like the afterglow of a burnt-out. Pieces of the background illuminated by the limited light were revealed before everyone's eyes. From the top to the edge, the light spread until it slowly illuminated the entire scene. Only then did the light dissipate. At present, the background of the starry sky had turned golden. The full appearance of the colossal temporal law fragment was revealed, and they were standing right at the center of it. It was a very shocking sight. The content of this fragment is not small at all. For a fragment of this size, other than the law of time, many other laws are complete and normal. This is interesting. Yuchi was genuinely surprised. He had never seen something of this scale before. This primal chaos was attracted by this huge law fragment. It has been here for a long time, absorbing the law power of this fragment. There's an invisible connection between them, which is why I saw it. Yun Nuoshing placed his hand on his forehead, and couldn't help but click his tongue in admiration. There was really everything in the void. In the void, it was impossible to see everything. When Feng Qinghuang and Mei Mao flashed, perhaps because Yun Nuoshing had illuminated the front of the law fragment, she unexpectedly discovered something. Her breath suddenly stopped. She held his hand and pointed her other hand at the depths of the starry sky. "Little star, there's the breath of life there." The exclamations were like the bone-chilling wind that blew past their exposed shoulders and necks in the dead of winter, causing everyone, including Yun Nuoshing, to shiver, and their faces quickly darkened. In this ghostly place, anything could happen, but the thing that was least likely to appear was the trace of life. Now, Feng Qinghuang said that she felt the breath of life. This was simply a ghost story. Chapter 1549. There was a faint smell of blood in the air. It was probably because the blood was mixed with a considerable amount of the power of the natural order. That was why the smell drifted out from this lonely place. In the end, Yun Nuoshing and the others caught it. They were at the bottom of the starry sky within the storm. According to the sense of hierarchy, the system was divided into 4 zones from top to bottom. The top had the opposite wind direction from the storm zone and the storm of order, which was also the place where the 2 forces clashed. The second and third layers were the places where the 4 star clusters lived. They had just come out from that place, and then this bottom layer, where the stars were dim and there were not many star clusters. As they approached the bottom of the storm zone, they could see that the view before them became wider, and the storm was more vast and destructive. The bottom was different from the top. They could see the stars outside from the top, but the bottom was sealed. There was a huge cloud vortex with solid form blocking the way out from the bottom. As the storm zone rotated, it was churning, and there were energy-boiling movements from the vortex below. Yun Nuoshing and the others followed the scent of life that Feng Qinghuang had led them to the bottom of the storm zone. Not long after they came in, they smelled the smell of blood. There were balls of blood floating in the air. The blood droplets floating in the air were not only red, but there were other colors as well. They all carried the scent of life that did not belong to humans. They were slightly evil, and seemed to carry a little bit of the power of the natural order. Feng Qinghuang was a little surprised when she saw the situation here. She looked at Yun Nuoshing and said, "It's here," but, looking around, there was no sign of life at all. What floated in this starry sky were only some blood beads filled with a strange aura. These were probably the aura of life that she had sensed. That's about it. Yun Nuoshing reached out and touched a drop of blood droplet. She rubbed it between her fingers and her expression changed slightly. It's fresh. It just happened not long ago. It might have happened around the time we came in. When Jing Yuanji and the others heard this, their expressions also changed. They looked up and saw a large blood fog in front of them, but there were no broken limbs left. Just looking at this very bloody and shocking scene, one might think that there had been a great battle here, but in fact it might just be the blood of several behemoths that had spilled all over the ground, all over the starry sky. After all, when they came, they really did not feel the residual feeling of a large-scale energy conflict. If they had not come just in time to disperse, it would have been washed clean by the storm. There are no traces of living creatures. Min walked around and shook his head at Yun Nuoshing. The natural order and rules are chaotic. It's hard to track them down. Hearing this, Yun Nuoshing freed one of her hands that was holding Frost. She took out the Book of Epics and waved it around. Then, she waved her hand and led the others forward. Over there. Yuchi could not help but mutter, this war site has existed for so long. Are there really living creatures here? And looking at these traces, it seems that they usually wander around in the starry sky? And they have some dealings with each other. Their relationship is not very good, Ning Fei said. Ning Fei said. In short, this place was a fresh battlefield. Visiting and saying hello would not leave such a little, tragic trace. Found it. It's here. After flying for a short while, Yun Nuoshing stopped. She pointed forward with her chin. Everyone looked forward. There was a surging black fog. It covered an area of about 10,000 miles. There was a very weak scent of life inside, like some kind of life crawling in a cave. The scent was not bad. This made them a little surprised. There was actually some kind of powerful life in this strange space of the ruins. They had not been discovered at all before this. They were not the only ones. Oh, come to think of it, it was actually very easy to explain. They had come to this space empty-handed. Who knew if there would be even more bizarre things happening as they went deeper into the space? There was fourth rank, there was a storm zone, there was a hole, such a huge rule fragment, and so on. Calm down, calm down. They should remain calm. Mei Mao suddenly stood up and got into a combat stance. Here it comes. Everyone got into a combat stance when they heard that. Then, the black fog in front of them suddenly boiled. Silver lights flashed, and countless life forms left their nest and surged out. They were wrapped in black fog and shot toward them like a sharp arrow, that had to be the size of a siege crossbow. Moreover, it was used to deal with a god-level defense. Good Lord, one arrow was tens of thousands of feet long. The energy of the void surged in Min's hand, and it slashed forward like a sharp blade. It happened to meet a bloody mouth and split the strange creature into two from the middle. Blood splattered across the starry sky, and the blood that splattered out contained several types of auras. She was stunned when she saw this. How could there be several types of blood flowing out from this lifeform's body? Looking at the blood droplets that were left behind in the bloody mist, could it have been left behind by these life forms themselves? The silver sword that had lost its power was controlled by Yu Qi with a wave of his hand. While Jing Yuanji and Min blocked the crossbow bolts that were aimed at their faces, he examined this strange life form. It looked like a snake with a slender body covered in red scales full of energy. There were two symmetrical left and right claws at the front of its body, and they were 8-fingered claws. The back was probably all its tail. Its forehead was triangular, and it was as sharp as a long arrow. It had no eyes, and it had a bloody mouth with several rows of teeth. The snow-white teeth were as sharp as swords. This row of teeth hung in front of it looked like the 1,000-sword tomb. Moreover, they were all in the scale of a giant sword, and each of them was more than 1,000 feet long. Against the weak starlight, they looked cold and shiny, sending chills down one's spine. Being bitten by this thing was definitely similar to being pierced by 10,000 swords. After examining the normal state of the body and looking at its structural rules, Yuqi's expression changed slightly. It seems to be a life form that can survive by devouring other life forms and directly absorbing their life force. When there's no life force left, it can even rely on the fourth-rank rules drifting in this starry sky to maintain a state of lower activity to survive. A strange life form derived from fourth-rank rules, huh? I've only seen it with my own eyes. Yun Nuoxing could not help but exclaim. She had circled the illusory void a few times before, but she had not seen any strange life form there. This was the first time she had seen it. The void was so big that nothing was too strange. Wait, you're saying that it survives by devouring other life forms? Min's expression suddenly changed. Then the blood of other life forms in its body. There should be other strange life forms in this place. Otherwise, where would that kind of blood come from? As for the blood in their bodies, in addition to the scene we just saw, Yun Nuoxing shut up appropriately. However, shutting up could not stop everyone from continuing to think. Their faces twitched. So, the bloody scene just now was the trace left behind after a sumptuous meal? This time, their stomachs were cut open before they could digest the food they had just eaten. Bang! Ning Fei turned sideways and slapped the body of a sharp arrow that was charging in front of him. Its body exploded into blood droplets that scattered all over the starry sky. There was a blood droplet that was 100 meters tall that almost buried him. He was so scared that he hurriedly dodged. He had just figured out what was going on. This time, he did not want to fight a bloody battle. That was too King disgusting. In the distance, silver arrows shot out from the boiling nest of black clouds. It was as if there were countless silver starlight pouring out from the starry sky. The group's expression changed when they saw this. These things weren't particularly powerful. It wasn't a problem to deal with several hundred of them in one move, but when they thought of their blood spraying out into the starry sky, it was too disgusting. This was repulsive. Disgusting. Let's retreat for now. There's no need to tangle with the strange life forms here, Yun Nuoxing said softly. Just as he was about to finish off some of the silver arrow snakes that were too close, the name he had just given, he suddenly felt a shadow fall behind him. Some kind of huge thing blocked the falling starlight, causing them to turn their gazes, and then they were all stunned. Out of nowhere, a large school of fish appeared in the starry sky. Well, at least they looked like fish. There were scales growing out of what was probably the gills of the fish, like ribbons reflecting the light of the starry sky. The scales circled several thousand feet around the fish's body. There were also two brilliant light screens shining at the fish's tail. At first glance, one could tell that they were full of energy life. These fish were about 10 to 100 times larger than the silver arrow snake. Their huge eyes did not even look at Yun Nuoxing and the others as they rushed toward the former. The big fish attacked the silver arrow snakes, using their huge bodies as weapons. They either bit or whipped the silver arrow snake. The latter used their arrow-like heads and 8 claws to remove their scales, leaving countless bloody holes on the big fish. They also drilled into the big fish's bodies like snakes and ate their flesh and blood. Suddenly, the battle became a battle between the fish and the snake. Yun Nuoxing and the others had nothing to do. They were surging with energy, but neither side cared about them. These fish were probably attracted by the blood and corpses of the silver arrow snake. As for the result, there was no need to guess. The strange fish could use energy, but the silver arrow snakes could not. In terms of physical strength, the latter was not as strong as the former. In fact, the result had already been decided. However, the number of silver arrow snakes was too large, so it took some time to deal with the big fish. What is this? Ning Fei looked at the scene in front of him and could not help but tear his eyes. The big strange fish were fighting in the front, and the small fish were eating the flesh and blood left by their own kind in the corners and gaps of the battlefield. Oh, the blood of the fish happened to be in the body of the silver arrow snake. These two races had probably been fighting in this place for many years. At this time, a beautiful fish that was only 10 feet long and more than 1 foot wide floated in front of them. It slowly picked up the loot left by its own kind and ate it unhurriedly, attracting the attention of Yun Nuoxing and the others. Got it. Siyu suddenly reached out and hugged the fish. Mei Mao said to Yun Nuoxing with joy, "Little star, let's catch a fish and raise it at home, okay?" Yun Nuoxing, how many times have I told you not to casually bring things home? Our house is already messy enough. TSK, you can casually bring girls home. Why can't I bring 2 pets home? Yun Nuoxing. It's over. He was speechless. See you, this girl always made him speechless. Although that was the meaning, the essence was definitely not like that. Looking at the little fish struggling futilely in Siyu's arms, the corners of Yun Nuoxing's eyes twitched, and he sighed. After thinking about it, there was no problem anyway. It would probably take some time before they left this 4th rank area. He would think about how to deal with it, in case the little girl found out that her fish was gone as soon as she left this place. Oh, in that case she would not even realize it herself and would only forget about the fish. He should think about it. He was still a little interested in 4th rank life forms. The situation after that was even messier. The snake was eaten by the fish, and the fish was swallowed by some unknown life form that came from behind. Then, a koan came and cleaned up the scene. The koan was divided and eaten by several strange giant beasts with hands. In short, the whole scene looked strange. There seemed to be some kind of wonderful ecological balance at the bottom of this storm area. No, it was a food chain. What kind of ecology was there in this godforsaken place? Yun Nuoxing and the others watched the show for a day or two. When the giant beasts that were the size of planets finally came out and killed the koan, they planned to leave this place. They passed through the small-scale headwind storm at the top of the storm area and finally slipped out of the hole. Before they completely slipped out, they seemed to hear the angry roars of the giant beasts. It seemed like they had encountered some more powerful life form, but they did not bother to look. What a strange place! Jing Yuanji could not help but say, a dilapidated war site, filled with countless destructive rules, and 2 conflicting forces of order, can actually evolve such a life form. The void tends toward order. The evolution of life is never determined by itself. Yun Nuoxing said calmly, as long as the void doesn't stop, it'll always have a way to give birth to life in even stranger places. Even 4th ranks can give birth to life. That's not right. Even a nature-defying life form like the origin life exists. What else do you think is impossible? Everyone nodded. That was true. Origin life forms were the most miraculous and unbelievable life forms in the Great Yuan realm. Compared to them, 4th rank life forms and life forms that were not naturally born in sequence were no longer as miraculous. Similarly, according to probability, perhaps the latter had a higher probability of being born. Origin life forms, on the other hand, had to use all the power and luck of the entire Great Yuan realm to be born with great difficulty in a crevice. The probability was so low that even the primordial beginning heavenly god would shudder. Otherwise, it would not have been called a miraculous creation. Someone's coming in, Min said as he looked at other parts of the starry sky. Oh, they should have been here a long time ago. After all, we were only a little early. It just so happens that we've been lurking in this storm for a while. Even if we're seen by others, it won't cause any trouble, Yu Qi said as he looked at the storm beneath his feet. Anyway, let's leave first. It's best if we don't run into anyone if we can. Speaking of which, one of the goals of coming to the ruins this time has been achieved. The rest. Yun Nuoxing's gaze shifted to the depths of the starry sky, but his gaze was looking at a deeper place. Is to go in and take a look. By the way, how's your harvest? Yuchi shook his head. I've been wandering around here for many years. My harvest is actually the same. A little. Min, Jing Yuanji, and Ning Fei both nodded. Jing Yuanji stared at Yun Nuoxing for a while and said, "Let's not talk about that first. Master Feng, are you all right? Origin chaos." Only then did everyone remember that this guy had swallowed such a huge cluster of origin chaos. They did not see any changes in him over the past 2 days. My transformation is rather slow. I'm still in the process of energy fusion, breaking through the shackles and preparing to continue evolving. This step is long and requires a lot of time and energy to accumulate. Yun Nuoxing shook his head. It will probably take a while for you to see some minor changes in me. There were many lone wolves in this part of the starry sky. They probably did not want to follow the Soul Traversing Academy and wanted to come in to see if they could get some benefit. They sneaked in while the Soul Traversing Academy opened the spatial gateway. Battles broke out from time to time. Some people would occasionally look at Yun Nuoxing and the others. However, this group of people had already displayed terrifying strength in the ancient city that day. Those who had a bit of foresight and had not lost their memories would naturally not go near them. They still remembered the scene of the 3 people evaporating into thin air and did not want to be part of it. There were not many rules and order fragments in this part of the starry sky. It was probably because it was controlled by the 4th rank but was not very stable, which made it seem even more chaotic. The order and rule fragments here were not as stable and useful as the space outside. They were ready-made outside, so they had to deal with the things inside. If they did not deal with them well, it would be a waste of effort. Some things might even injure themselves. Those lone wolves who came in here with their own plans were probably going to be disappointed. After wandering in the starry sky for a while, Yun Nuoxing and the others suddenly felt an extremely huge burst of energy. It was as if thousands of soldiers and horses were fighting in the starry sky. They looked at each other, turned around, and headed toward the starry sky that suddenly shone brightly. It did not take long for them to arrive at the place where the energy burst out. Following that, there were many sounds of fighting and killing mixed with rule-bending power. At a glance, they saw the leaders of the Soul Traversing Academy and the Celestial Court leading a large group of powerhouses to charge and break through enemy lines. Meanwhile, they were fighting against a group of gigantic exotic beasts, abnormal life forms derived from 4th ranks. The life forms that appear in this place are a few levels stronger than those that we've seen before. This was a huge beast horde. The starry sky seemed to have turned into a nest. Many exotic beasts of different races and different forms surged out from the depths of the starry sky, surging toward the human life forms. They were supposed to belong to different races, but they had merged into one force. It was likely that there was a rather huge Dominator-level life form standing behind them. Unfortunately, no matter how strong they were, they could not fight against a group of life forms that stood at the top of the Order World Pyramid. Yun Nuoxing murmured and narrowed his eyes. This was not a good situation. If he allowed them to kill their way forward like a hot knife through butter, they would gain courage and momentum from killing their way into the deeper space and die. Then, his wishful thinking would be in vain. He still wanted this group of cannon fodder. Ah no, this group of forces could come in handy when dealing with the abyssal death mist. His eyes swept around and suddenly saw something. Yun Nuoxing could not help but smile wickedly. "Come, let's do something fun." Something fun? Everyone was curious. Yun Nuoxing pointed ahead with his gaze. "There's a big guy there. It's not convenient for us to show ourselves. It's not strong enough, but if we work together, Everyone thought for a moment and thought about his previous plan. Then, they responded with a no. It seemed like he was planning to beat them all back. At least, he had to suppress their soaring spirit. The black fog that looked like a nest, the size of a star cluster, was still surging out of 4th rank life forms. powerful life forms of all shapes and sizes were constantly surging out of it. A pair of eyes the size of a planet was hidden in the black fog. It stared at the group of abnormally thin and small life forms and gradually narrowed its eyes. It could sense an unusually terrifying destructive power from them. There had never been such a life form in this place. "Hey, big guy, I want to discuss something with you." A voice that contained a smile suddenly rang in its ears, causing it to tremble. Suddenly, it saw a group of tiny things appear in front of it. Even its scales were standing up. "You don't have to be so nervous. Let's discuss something. I know you can understand." If you don't say anything, I'll take that as a yes." Yun Nuoshing laughed. He did not care that it was frightened and said to himself, "That group of outsiders disturbed your peace. You want to stop them, and it just so happens that I want to beat them up. It's not convenient for us to show ourselves, but we can, hee. You should be able to see the abnormality in us. It's even more abnormal than theirs. If I'm hostile, you should know what will happen to you. Therefore, you don't have to worry too much. I'm too lazy to talk too much. I'll tell you the reason why I'm here." As for how to judge, the eyes that were the size of a planet narrowed slightly. A moment later, the fourth-rank life form that seemed to be a ruler shrunk its gigantic size. However, it was still hidden in the black fog. It understood Yun Nuoshing's intention and responded with a string of words in his mind. In short, it agreed. Yun Nuoshing smiled and stretched out a hand. "Then, it's a pleasure working with you. This is how people in our form greet each other." After waiting for a while, something that looked like a palm or some kind of tentacle appeared in his hand and touched him lightly. The touch in his hand was a little strange. It was as if he had grabbed a ball of soft, sun-dried mud. Chapter 1550. Little guy, do you want to enter the sea of noise as well? The creature whose face could not be seen clearly and whose skin looked like dried mud muttered in his soul. Yun Nuoshing could feel many gazes turning toward him in the clouds after he said that. There was some surprise and a hint of fear in their eyes. The sea of noise? Yun Nuoshing blinked and spread his hands. You'd better change the way you put it. Based on what you know and what you say, it doesn't make sense to people like us who just entered. However, if you're saying that we're going deeper into space, yes, we do want to go deeper and take a look. There's something in that deeper place that we're slightly interested in. The Dominator, whose face could not be seen, mumbled something. A moment later, he said softly in Lin Huang's soul, "Deeper? Yes, it's really deeper. There's nothing in that deep and dark sea of death other than endless noise and chaos. You're helping us, so I should stop you, but you're very powerful, incomparably powerful. I can only remind you, little guy, there's only crazy noise and the clamor of death in that sea of noise. The breath of the past and the future will sink there." It said a few words, followed by a series of gibberish, which made people feel confused. Yun Nuoshing roughly understood that the words that he could not understand were words that could not be completely communicated even if he used his soul to communicate, so he did not pay too much attention to it. Noise and whatnot. That was quite interesting. However, he did not know if there was any mistake in their understanding of each other. After all, they were from different races, lived in different places, and had different experiences. Only God knew what these fourth-rank life forms were talking about meant to people like him, who lived in a normal, orderly environment. Yun Nuoshing threw out balls of light that contained massive amounts of energy. They were all processed by him. The energy that existed in this orderly environment could strengthen the power of all life forms in this nest for a considerable period of time. He also controlled the extent of it, allowing them to defeat those fellows from the Soul Fairy Academy. As for the damage, it was estimated that there would not be too many casualties. Unless he deliberately wanted to create more killings, that kind of scene would not occur. Alright, I've used up all the energy I collected. Not a single drop is left. Yun Nuoshing let out a long breath and wiped his forehead. Although there was no sweat at all, he waved his hand and said, "That's it then. Please teach them a lesson." "Wait a moment, little guy." Yun Nuoshing and the others stopped in their tracks. A moment later, the clouds in front of them suddenly split open. About 1,000,000 miles away, a spatial tunnel appeared in the space. It was exposed directly to the space, and it was abnormally stable. There was no chaotic spatial power coming from it. It seemed to be a stable tunnel that led to the depths of space. Spatial tunnel. Yun Nuoshing said in surprise. No wonder they would besiege this place. It's because they found a stable passage. Speaking of which, their lair spanned a distance of 1,000,000 miles. That was very exaggerated. Who knew how many fourth-rank life forms were hiding here? This starry sky had been so quiet earlier. Could all of them be hiding here? Go on, little guy. Good luck, the ruler said to Yun Nuoshing and the others. He then turned around and headed toward the battlefield. Yun Nuoshing smiled and waved at them, leading them toward the spatial tunnel. The scale of the tunnel before them was slightly larger than the previous one that led to this space. Although there was also a lot of energy mixed in, it was much more stable than the previous tunnel. Perhaps they could even see the existence of this tunnel when they jumped in this time. Boom! Behind him, there was a huge explosion of destructive energy coming from the battlefield. That was the result of the energy he had just thrown down. The joint attack of the Crossing Soul Academy seemed to have become a little chaotic because of this sudden attack. Sneaking a glance, those fellows were caught off guard by this sudden attack that was tens of thousands of times stronger than what he had expected. Right now, they were reacting to the situation. Even he was being tossed around in a flurry. Well, if we abandon this tunnel, they can still find other tunnels. This space can't stop them. Yun Nuoshing looked back and shrugged. She carried Frost, who was in a deep sleep, and walked into the tunnel, leaving behind a lingering voice that slowly dissipated. We have to think of other ways. I have a feeling that little star is the mastermind behind all of this. See you and the others' murmurs drifted out. In the starry sky, they were still in another part of the starry sky. They had crossed the tunnel from one star region to the neighboring star region. This time, they did not feel like they had crossed the world barrier. Perhaps the simple barrier that separated them had already melted, or perhaps they were just in different regions of the same starry sky. This time, the passageway was two-way. It wasn't until all of them had arrived that the teleportation gate slowly closed. Closed from the other side. Yun Nuo and the others looked ahead and observed the starry sky. The stars were dim, and the aura of death filled the starry sky. The sea of noise, the sea of noise. Where's the sea? Gu Zhongming looked around, but he only saw a sea of stars and nothing else. He could not help but spread his hands to the others. It's just a way of saying something. Don't pay too much attention to it. Yun Nuoshing shook her head. The star region was also called the Sea of Stars, but it was not really a sea of water. It was just a way of saying it. According to what the ruler had said, the so-called Sea of Noise was filled with endless crazy noises and the clamor of death. Perhaps there was another meaning to it. After all, this was the only meeting between the two races. How could so many words be said at once? Everyone could only make do and understand. Even so, there's nothing here. Could it be hidden in some corner of the starry sky again? Could it be that we have to slowly search for it again? Yuchi could not help but roll his eyes. The fourth order and rules are even more chaotic. We're indeed close to the center, but the ruler deliberately added a name to this place. It shouldn't be that simple. Maybe it's because our defenses are too well prepared, so we can't feel anything. Yun Nuoshing suddenly hammered her palm and pointed at the layers of hidden barriers on their bodies. Even if there's something, it's probably blocked out, so we can't feel anything. Everyone agreed and felt that it was the case. Thus, other than ensuring that nothing unexpected happened to the magic array, leaving behind one or two protective barriers of order and rules, they removed everything else. The moment all those barriers disappeared, a strange buzzing sound suddenly drilled into their ears. Then, there were suddenly many strange roars in that sound, like the sound of a row of large stars being destroyed and falling. The void collapsed, the nothingness dissolved, the void poured backward, and other strange roars of waves. It also seemed like they had fallen into a black hole in an instant, and they heard the monstrous noise of the destructive torrent of everything in the world washing past them. Gu Zhongming was startled. He grimaced and covered his ears. He opened his mouth and roared at Ning Fei, "This is really noise." Ning Fei's face was also distorted by the noise. He opened his mouth but could not hear what he was saying. He roared back, "Ah? What are you saying?" I said, "It's so noisy." Asterisk. At er. Asterisk at yen. Even Qing Yu, who had been calm for thousands of years, was pierced by this sudden noise. Her pretty face changed slightly. After a while, she felt that she could not take it any more and took the initiative to block out the noise she heard. Back! Yun Nuoxing shouted, and countless barriers appeared once again, blocking all sounds. Only then did everyone heave a sigh of relief, and his pretty face couldn't help but twitch a few times. This is really noisy. It's really King noisy. Siyu hugged her fish that had fainted because of the noise. Feng Qinghuang picked her ears and moved to Yun Nuoxing's side. She pointed at herself and said, "I'm deaf." Yun Nuoxing could not help but smile bitterly. All right, let's take a break. I know what the so-called clamor is now." Yun Nuoxing let out a long sigh, grinned, and waited for everyone to catch their breath before saying, "Those are the noises of the void, the endless noises of destruction that originated from the void of this war ruin. The dissipated worlds here, the dead laws here, the conflicting orders here, everything that happened in the void, the sounds produced by the things that happened in the void have all smashed into this place. Of course, this is just the surface. I can feel that there are other things hidden in this starry sky. These endless noises are just a part of it. There are also some things that I am quite familiar with." As Yun Nuoxing said, he frowned and sighed. The things that he was familiar with, the things that he did not want to see no matter what. He had better increase his defense to prevent himself from bumping into them. Speaking of which, they were really haunting him. Wherever he went, he would bump into them. Although this place, the war site, shelved for countless years, the conflicting orders, the conflicting rules, the overlapping fragments, and the bizarre changes, all these factors combined could easily cause those things to appear. He had even dealt with them not long ago. The sin of order, the shadow of order. Phew! Fortunately, it has not settled into the sin of the world. Otherwise, I would have run away. Yun Nuoxing grimaced at the little angel in his soul. The little angel raised her head and looked at him helplessly. She was really unlucky to bump into them wherever she went. However, there seems to be something else. Something like resentment mixed in the noise just now. I heard a lot of voices. You may have been distracted by the noise, but I noticed something else. Let's go forward and take a look. Maybe we can find something." Yun Nuoxing nodded. "That's right. Speaking of which, this girl could hear the inner thoughts." However, probably because they had been together for a long time and she had also withdrawn her magical power, he had forgotten about it over time. Did it originate from the inner thoughts that she heard mixed in with the endless noise? This is even more interesting. The noise of the void was something that was destroyed in the void. It would be dissolved and disintegrated by the laws of the void, forming such noises. For a period of time, such noises also reverberated in the void near the realm of the gods. It was mostly produced when the void devoured the laws and order on a large scale. It was very easy for such noises to appear in a battle between high-level lifeforms in the void. Generally speaking, it was impossible for such noises to appear in the realm of the gods. Those noises would be filtered by the world barrier. Moreover, once they left the pure void, such noises would not appear. The void in the realm of the gods was not strong enough to cause such a phenomenon to occur. An environment of pure void. A starry sky soaked in a pure void environment. Yun Nuoshing led everyone on a stroll in the starry sky that they had been the first to step into. They walked in a random direction. He left a tiny part of his god's soul outside to monitor the situation of the void noises. He did not dare to leave too much behind, afraid that he would be killed by the noise. Some kind of continuous void rule limits this area. The effect is not as strong as the world barrier, and the void itself does not isolate itself. Therefore, such a situation has occurred. The starry sky that exists in a pure void environment reverberates with the endless noises left behind when the void destroys everything. Yun Nuoshing paused for a moment. The closer we get to the center, the closer the environment seems to be to chaos, disorder, and noise. Even the void itself feels a little out of control. In a situation where the void is out of control, does a fourth rank have such terrifying dominating power? Jing Yuanji could not help but ponder. However, she saw Yun Nuoshing shake his head. Fourth rank is not enough to cause such a degree of change. To be able to cause the void itself to go out of control and change the void itself, it's because of this war site. There are many reasons and many factors that have combined to finally create such a situation. There are still many things that we haven't figured out yet. Fourth rank alone is still controlled by the void. The shadow of order and the sin of order should also have played a small role in this. That's right, in a space as huge as this war site, endless rules and order must have been wasted and destroyed back then. Those things might have been produced when the war broke out back then. It's just that the battle was too intense at that time, causing a considerable portion of these two things to be destroyed. What's left here now is the result of many things settling down after a long time. They were catalyzed by the countless remnant ashes from back then and were regenerated by a new cycle. In any case, since those things have appeared here, we need to be 120% vigilant. Anyone who touches those things won't feel good. In the barren and desolate star zone, the stars in this starry sky were much dimmer than the few spaces they had seen before. The entire starry sky appeared to be in a state of dusk. Fiery red light spots filled the sky, and the more intense the star flames burned, the closer they were to the end. Well, that was the original situation. In this place where the rules were engraved, they were the eternal guardians of this dim star zone. Even if countless years had passed, they would not dissipate. This place, is there nothing else other than those noises? Yuchi looked around. They had been walking in this star zone for a short period of time. So far, other than the piercing demonic sound that they had heard when the barrier was lifted, there was nothing else. Some things are hidden very deeply. You won't want to see them, trust me. Yun Nuoshing responded with a grin. His eyes drifted around in the starry sky. Suddenly, he paused. However, other than those things that no one wants to see, there are indeed other things left behind. Come. The place they were heading to was the last star cluster left in this dim starry sky. It was very small, perhaps only spanning tens of thousands of light years. Its edge was already showing signs of collapse. Other than the light in the center that was still bright, the stars in other places were already dim. Yun Nuoshing led them straight to the center of the star cluster. They pushed aside the layers of light and went straight to the center of the star cluster. Ignoring the light of the stars that were still like the sands of the Ganges, they saw a black behemoth, lurking in the center of the star cluster. But it was different from the one they knew. It was no longer a thing with boundaries but a definite entity. Although it also had a huge power, it made them feel that something was wrong. This doesn't look like those black holes in the starry sky? Siyu pulled Yun Nuoshing's sleeve and asked softly. You can tell at a glance, right? Yun Nuoshing nodded. Its predecessor probably was. After all, it was in the center of the star system. But later, something bad happened, and it probably became like this. Suddenly, 3 air currents floated out from his body and landed in front of him. They turned into 3 spiritual bodies. The 3 of them stared at the black entity with a serious expression. Yun Nuoshing looked at them and said, "You guys feel it too?" That female soul lightly nodded towards him and said with a serious voice, "Very strong resentment. Just like us, it is the condensation of consciousness and soul that remains on this battlefield, unable to break free and achieve transcendence. But looking at its end, it seems to be more tragic than us," the short-haired man said with lingering fear. "Well, if even you guys say so, then I guess I'm right." Yun Nuoshing looked at the black sphere. It was a tomb built by countless fragments of consciousness and souls that had fallen on the battlefield. It was an eternal tomb buried in a place illuminated by endless starlight. Yun Nuoshing didn't know what had happened inside. Perhaps after the battlefield fell silent, the fragments of consciousness and souls that had lost all power drifted in the starry sky and unintentionally gathered here. They slowly occupied the black hole that was originally the center of the star cluster and turned it into a huge body of consciousness. At the same time, an extremely huge amount of resentment that filled the starry sky gathered here. The resentment that originated from a higher life form caused it to undergo an abnormal change. In the end, it became this strange object. Perhaps it was because they were too focused on it, or because they were too close, the sleeping monster suddenly opened its eyes. The surface of the huge consciousness that had a physical body suddenly lit up with scarlet light. The entire black sphere slowly released a cloud of mist that seemed to have a physical body, filling this part of the starry sky. Yun Nuoshing was the first to notice this change, and a puzzled voice came out of his mouth. The scarlet light on the surface of the black sphere drew a huge eye pattern. A closed eye was slowly opening at this moment. The eyeball, which was the size of a star, stared at them without any emotion. This glance made everyone feel as if there was an entire world of light being stared at them with an indifferent expression. If they were not mentally prepared, this glance would definitely make anyone's nerves slow down. Those with poor endurance would probably burst into tears at this moment. A moment later, the indifferent eye turned ferocious. Blood-red light suddenly burst out from its surface, and the brightness instantly exceeded the total brightness of all the stars in this starry sky. A sound wave of rule impact with extreme negative emotions instantly resounded through the starry sky, causing Yun Nuoshing and the others' expressions to change. They hurriedly retreated, and the moment they retreated, they tacitly raised their hands to open a more powerful isolation barrier. However, they were dazed for a moment by the gaze of an entire world of light life. At this moment, the shrill roar of an entire world of light life pierced their ears like a demonic sound. The barrier that they had previously set up collapsed in the face of this unreasonable power. Suddenly, their minds seemed to be filled with a void and nothingness that contained infinite chaos. The information that contained infinite rules and the aura of order instantly caused their minds to shut down. Not to mention them, even if Heavenly God of the beginning was here, his consciousness would probably collapse at this moment, let alone them. In an instant, the horrifying rule sound wave that approached them caused the starry sky to collapse into countless large cracks that led to the void and nothingness. Everyone groaned and lay down in the starry sky. Seeing that they were about to die, Yun Nuoshing turned pale with fright. She forcibly suppressed her chaotic mind that could no longer think about anything and instinctively displayed the most powerful isolation barrier that could isolate order and rule at this moment to envelop everyone. Then, she used the last drop of her strength to send her group of people flying toward the edge of the starry sky. At the last moment before completely falling into chaos, Yun Nuoshing caught a glimpse from the corner of her eyes that the black sphere in her line of sight was falling apart. Endless black fog soared into the sky, as if billions of demons had broken through the shackles and rushed into the starry sky. Like a small boat drifting in this tsunami of sound waves, an inexplicable chain reaction occurred at this moment. All the large planets disintegrated and broke apart. Some humanoid, or things that did not have a physical body but only carried some kind of chaotic consciousness crawled out from those places. They opened their mouths and roared in response. Amidst the roars of billions of living beings, the starry sky was filled with gloomy clouds and sorrows. This is the so-called Sea of Noise. God. She felt like she had seen a crack in the reincarnation road just now. Well, that was probably an illusion. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.